I got reincarnated with a 1-month warranty. Most transmigrators wake up young, handsome, and full of potential. I woke up as Cho Hung-yu, 50 years old, turning 51 in a month, gray-bearded, hunchbacked, so poor my rice jar had cobwebs in it, and, according to the cosmic paperwork, scheduled to die the day I hit that birthday. The universe's welcome package, ladies and gentlemen. No sword, no dragon, no cheat harem, a death sentence, and a bad back. Here's the situation the memories dumped on me. I'm an earthling. My soul landed in this dying old peasant, in a world that's basically the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms cranked to maximum misery. Dozens of warlords and half-dynasties clawing at each other, plague, famine, taxes that eat 60% of everything you grow, and commoners dropping like flies. Li Family Village is 60 households of thatched huts and slow starvation, and I'm the poorest man in it, an orphan since the plague took my scholar father. No wife, no kids, no food, and a body that gets dizzy if I stand up too fast. Then, the first night, half asleep and stomach growling, I found the one thing that makes this survivable. A book, floating in my own head, yellowed cover, one word on it, Genealogy. I opened it to my page. Clan Chief, Cho Hung-yu. Combat strength, blank. Spouse, none. Talent, none. Expected lifespan, 51. Offspring, none. 51, 1 month out. So the system's telling me the same thing my bones are. Continue the family line or die trying. Get a wife, get an heir, and maybe the genealogy rewrites itself and this death clock resets. Or maybe it ships me back to Earth. Either way, the road out runs straight through not dying single. Cool. Very cool. Love that for me. And then, like the punchline the universe had been setting up, my lifelong best friend, village chief Wang Guangzong, kicked open my hut with the greatest opening line in frontier history. "Old Li, do you want a wife?" Turns out the government hands out wives. Every 3 years, the empire ships a cartload of convict women to the frontier for the bachelors to pick from like a produce stand, on one condition: you enlist. Wife, plus a month of rations in exchange for your neck in the army. And there's a catch inside the catch. You can only register up to age 50. At 51, I'm 1 month past the cutoff. This is the last train, the final call, the absolute buzzer beater of my entire romantic career. And Zhao Kai, bless the man, we've been friends since we were kids peeing in the same mud, pulled every string he had to sneak me onto it before the door closed forever. Enlist tomorrow, wife at 9 a.m. at the east end of the village, a month of food thrown in. A dying broke old man gets 1 shot to not die alone, and my childhood friend spent his favors buying it for me. I'd have gotten misty if I wasn't so hungry. So next morning, I hobbled out to the selection ground with the village's dozen bachelors, and I was, and I cannot stress this enough, the grandfather of the group. Gray hair, bent spine, standing in a lineup of strapping young men like somebody's confused elder who wandered into the wrong ceremony. The government wagon rolled up. 20-odd people, half of them brides, mostly daughters of executed officials and disgraced houses. Women the empire was one step from selling to brothels or shipping to the army as military prostitutes, which is the fate waiting for every bride not picked today. The strong young men lunged for the sturdy farm wives, the good breeders and field hands, and the crowd shoved me to the back like a slow-moving obstacle. By the time the scrum cleared, there were exactly 3 women left standing unclaimed. 3 sisters, pale-skinned, refined, clearly raised gentle before their family fell, looking at the ancient hunchback who was all that stood between them and the brothel. The eldest was in her 20s and visibly doing the math no person should have to do. Marry a man old enough to be her father or get sold. Survival instinct versus everything she was raised to want, fighting it out on her face in real time. And here's where I made the choice that reset my whole death sentence. The deputy commander running the wagon, a 100-man officer with the flat, dead eyes of a man who's killed more people than he can count, asked which one I'd take. I asked what happened to the ones I didn't. Brothel or army camp, he said, where women don't survive past 30. So I looked at 3 sisters, one bad decision away from hell, and told him, I'll take all 3. The whole ground went quiet. The village chief nearly fainted. I own 3 mu of land in a famine year. I can't feed 1 mouth, let alone 4. This is financial suicide with extra steps. The deputy commander raised an eyebrow, genuinely amused that the pants-sweating grandpa had ambitions this size, and warned me flat. Take them, and whatever happens to them is on me, not the government. Report to the county in 1 month, disobey, and it's execution. I'll take all 3. The sisters, Jiang Yixuan, the eldest, and her younger sisters, Jiang Xiuying and Jiang Lirong, went from bracing for a brothel to bracing for a stranger's mud hut, which on this frontier is a genuine upgrade. And I got 3 months of dowry rations and, more importantly, 3 people the world had thrown in the trash. I don't hear the crowd's math. I never do. 3 lives, saved, for the price of a marriage certificate, and everyone thinking I've lost my mind. Best trade on the frontier. Let me be clear about what this actually is, because the genealogy in my head cares, and so should you. I didn't rescue 3 brides. I rescued my first 3 clan members. Everyone at that selection ground saw a delusional old man biting off 4 mouths he can't feed. What they couldn't see was the book behind my eyes, quietly waiting to find out what a dying nobody does when you hand him people to protect, and a cheat that runs on family. I walked my 3 new dependents home to a thatched hut so full of holes the wind whistled through it like a disappointed landlord, apologized for the state of the place — I'd been busy planting millet, as one is — and did the honest arithmetic while my stomach ate itself. It's March, lean season. The millet won't come in until July or August. The empire takes 60% of everything, and 4 people have about 6 months of borrowed rations between them and starving. Jiang Yixuan looked at the ruin she'd married into and stayed polite, because polite but hungry in a broken hut still beats the wedding procession farmers who'd groped her on the road. A fallen official's daughter, a broke old man on death's door, a system that runs on bloodline, and 1 month until the army comes to collect. Everyone else at that ground counted me a fool. They forgot the oldest rule on any frontier: never do the math on a man who's already read the last page of his own story and decided to rewrite it. The 3 sisters got to work turning my hovel into a home, patching the roof, sweeping decades of my bachelor filth, steaming the first real millet the rice jar had held in years. And when the food was ready, I did the one small thing that told them what kind of household this was going to be. I made everyone sit and eat together. No lord eats first, no women wait in the corner. 3 refined girls who'd braced for a brute wept a little into their bowls, because a hot meal is hard to come by out here, and a hot meal with a family is harder. So I asked the obvious question: how does a household of gentle, educated women end up on a slave wagon? And the eldest, Jiang Yixuan, gave me the answer that quietly set the whole series in motion. Their father was a 5th-rank official of the imperial court, executed in the autumn cull for offending the wrong man, the women all enslaved. Who'd he offend? The current prime minister. I choked on my rice. Because I'm a broke 51-year-old who owns 3 mu of dirt and a death clock, the sitting prime minister is roughly 9,000 rungs above me on the ladder, and I've just married the blood feud into my own hut. Filed away. Everything up here gets filed away. And that night, the cheat finally showed me the game I was actually playing. The marriage registered, and the genealogy in my head lit up and rewrote itself. Spouse 1, Jiang Yixuan. Combat strength, 1, equivalent to a fully grown adult. Talent unlocked, 10 Wang treasure hunt. Expected lifespan, 55. Offspring, none. Read that with me. My combat strength went from blank to a functioning adult man's. A talent skill switched on out of nowhere, and my death clock jumped from 51 to 55. 4 years, bought in 1 night. This is a system that runs on family, exactly like the book promised. Every bond I forge, every life I fold into this clan, feeds the man at the top of the tree. I woke up the next morning having slept the first good sleep in a decade, back a little straighter, looking, Jiang Yixuan swore, a few years younger. The dying grandpa was getting younger. The frontier had handed me a cheat that reverse ages me and levels me up for the crime of not being alone anymore, and I intended to abuse it into the ground, starting with that talent. 10 Wang treasure hunt. I can sense buried valuables within about 30 meters, and I knew exactly where to point it. 10 li from the village sat the ruins of a decades-old battlefield, thousands of men killed in a siege the old-timers still tell ghost stories about. A battlefield is just a bank nobody closed. I slung a basket and a hoe, walked out to the flat, haunted killing ground, and doubted the whole thing for about 5 minutes until the earth started glowing at me. A broken chunk of blackened silver, a month's income, 1 swing of the hoe. Then a full tael, then another. By noon, I'd dug up over 20 taels of silver out of dead men's pockets, a year's wages for a farming family, more than my whole village sees in a season, while the sisters were home genuinely wondering if the old man had wandered off to die in a ditch. 100 dead soldiers funded my winter and never noticed. The cheat that runs on family had just paid for the family. I strolled the 3 miles into Pinggan County to spend it. A border town of 4,000, the trade hub for dozens of villages, everyone walking around with copper coins strung so openly across their chests and belts that a pickpocket could retire in an afternoon, and bought rice, salt, and cloth, because my 3 wives owned exactly 1 set of clothes between the seasons. Then I hauled 50+ jin of supplies 10 miles home on a back that a week ago couldn't carry a water ladle without a rest, because combat strength 1 turns out to include not throwing your spine out. The sisters, who'd spent the day quietly debating whether they'd bet their lives on a broke corpse, met me at the village edge and watched me pour millet into a jar that had been cleaner than my face for months. and Jiang Yixuan smiled a smile she clearly hadn't used in a long time. Second sister Jiang Xiuying still didn't believe I'd found silver on the road. Smart girl. She'll learn that I found it lying around is going to be my answer for a lot of impossible things, and that it's technically always true. The system kept paying out, and I kept getting younger. Second sister Jiang Xiuying joined the household, and she came with the saddest ledger of the three. A woman who'd had a childhood sweetheart fiancé, another young official, before her father's fall scattered them all to prison and exile, still quietly praying he'd ride in and save her. Nobody rode in. Life on this frontier doesn't do rescues, it does slave wagons. So she folded into the clan too, and the genealogy ticked over. Combat strength, 2. Talent, 20-foot treasure hunt. Lifespan, 58. My death clock had gone 51 to 55 to 58. My treasure sense doubled its range, and I woke up looking like a man in his early 40s, straight-backed, black-haired, scholarly. The dying grandpa was aging backwards so fast that when I strode past the village chief, poor Xiao Kai stood there genuinely wondering whether he wasn't married to enough women, right up until he pictured his own terrifying wife and gave up on the theory. I've become a walking advertisement for a cheat nobody else can see. I took the new range up the mountain behind the city, where the treasure vision now glows on more than buried coins. First hit, a 30-year wild ginseng, worth 30-plus taels and, per local legend, capable of adding 30 years to a man's life. Then a 10-year root beside it. I dug both, the young one to test, the old one saved for later, because I'm still building a body out of nothing, and I'll take every year the mountain offers. Threw my wood knife through a pheasant, snagged a few rabbits, and was about to head home a rich man when the sky dropped a person on me. She came down through the treetops in white armor, snapping branches, hit the ground bleeding from the mouth, pale as death, and I looked up, and there was nothing up there. No cliff, no bird, just sky. Which, on a frontier where people fall out of the air, told me I'd just wandered into a much bigger world than midder and mud huts. I made the mistake of joking, "You don't also happen to be surnamed Lin, do you?" and got a dagger against my throat for it before she passed out cold, which is a fair response to a stranger's small talk. I took her armor first. A man of my new means does not leave loot. Got 100 feet away, and then either guilt or the sense that a sky-falling armored warrior is exactly the kind of opportunity the book keeps nudging me toward, turned me around. I hauled her home. The village women clucked about the old man dragging back a fourth pretty young thing. Can that old body even handle it? And I let them talk, because the joke's on a village that thinks the grandpa's collecting a harem when he's actually collecting the one person on this mountain who can fly. The sisters took her in without being asked. Kind-hearted Wang Xian couldn't leave an injured woman on the cold floor. Wang Qing covered her with the reed quilt she'd woven, and Wanyan, who it turns out knows pharmacology, brewed my ginseng and herb finds into medicine and spooned it into the stranger. Another useful skill I didn't know I'd married. The armored woman sank into a dead-to-the-world sleep that would last 2 full weeks. And while she slept, I put the household to work becoming a real household. Hired the village's strong young men, including the mouthy Wang Jianfeng, and the village chief's 3 hungry sons, all of whom squatted at my door, hoping to glimpse the pretty wives, and instead got a single bowl of dry millet each, because a full stomach out here beats a pretty face every time. And over half a month, we raised a proper courtyard beside the hut, mud brick and thatch, room for a growing clan. And I boiled the 10-year ginseng down for myself, to test whether the legends were true, because if a root can buy a man a decade, that's a better dowry than any bride the government ever handed out. The genealogy ticked. Combat strength, 3. Lifespan, 59. So 10-year ginseng buys about 1 year and 1 grown man's strength. Good to know the exchange rate. The armored woman woke up on schedule, promptly promised to kill me, and couldn't lift a finger to do it. Every meridian and bone in her body wrecked from whatever dropped her out of the sky. So I got the story out of my in-house encyclopedia instead. Second sister Wanyan took one look at that white armor and identified it cold. Female Mingguang armor, worn only by a military commander, which sent her into a full lecture on how the Great Liang army stacks up. 5 men a squad, up through captain, the ceiling a common soldier can never reach. Then Duteau, then a 500-man camp commander, then the 2,500-man army master. The white armored woman we'd been spoon-feeding porridge for 2 weeks was a 6th-rank military commander. A 6th-rank officer doesn't fall bleeding out of the trees near a nothing village unless she's fleeing something enormous. The exact same top-of-the-food-chain power struggle that got the Lin sisters' 5th-rank father beheaded. Which told me 2 things. The intrigue at the top of this dynasty is a meat grinder, and I just dragged a very important, very hunted person into my mud hut, filed away next to the prime minister. It also lit a fire under my own ambition. Wanyan asked, point blank, whether a man past 50 still dreams big. Duto, I said, the rank where a soldier stops being disposable and starts being an officer, is my bottom line. I'd watched a mere deputy officer make my village chief bow and scrape at the wife-wagon. Imagine being the man everyone bows to. Wang Xian added the wisdom that actually keeps you alive out here. High rank isn't earned by the bravest, it's inherited by the longest living. Survive, let the heroes die first, and the promotions fall to whoever's still breathing. Noted. And the system agreed with the plan. By the time the household was fully settled, the genealogy read, combat strength, 4, lifespan, 60. The strength of 4 grown men, enough to lift 300 pounds and swing a sword nobody on a battlefield stops. The returns diminished as I went. Same bloodline, the book pays less for sisters than strangers. But a dying hunchback had become, in under a month, a straight-backed man in his 40s with the body of 4. I did test one dumb theory in the county town, whether the cheat rewarded any connection or only real family. It doesn't. Only the clan feeds the tree. Lesson learned, 300 coins wasted. Moving on. Then the frontier reminded me what I was about to march into. On my last supply run, I hit the village gate right as a line of donkey carts rolled up, carrying the corpses of Li family village men who'd enlisted upright and came home lying down. His own clansmen, mostly, laid out lifeless, while wives and children wailed over the pillars of their households. The soldiers dumped the bodies, announced the compensation, 5 due of grain per dead man, and turned to leave because there were more carts behind, a whole convoy of the frontier's dead. The war up north was going badly, which is exactly why 6th-rank commanders are falling out of the sky. And when the village chief dared point out he'd been promised 10 due and silver, a soldier whipped him across the shoulder with a donkey lash. I dragged your corpses back. Be grateful, poor commoner, brutalizing poorer commoner. The whole rotten machine in one crack of a whip. That's the army I report to in 10 days. So I did the sober prep. Roasted 20 jin of millet for the barracks, bought firewood and salt and oil, left money and food so my clan wouldn't starve while I was gone, and took Shao Kai's one piece of real advice. Forge your own weapon, because the blade the army hands you is scrap. A month ago, I was a corpse in waiting, hoping to hold a woman's hand before I died. Now, I'm a 4-man-strong treasure hunter with a hunted commander asleep in my spare room, marching off to a war that's mailing my neighbor's home in pieces. The clock says 60 now instead of 51. I intend to push it a lot further. And in the county town, I picked up 2 things that turned a treasure-hunting grandpa into an actual soldier. The first was a person. A young woman named Qin Ming sold into a brothel by her own family for 5 taels, begging any stranger to buy her freedom before the place ground her down. I don't do charity. Survival's the only law out here. So I asked the only question that matters. What can you do? And she said the magic words. Her grandfather made armor for the government, and she can weave armor. On a frontier where owning armor is a capital crime and I'm about to march to war, a woman who can build me a suit out of battlefield scrap is worth more than gold. So I haggled the madam down and bought Qin Ming out of that place, freedom for the price of a few taels, and folded her into the clan as its armorer. Gina defed to combat strength, 5. The book counts every real bond I forge, and pulling a person out of hell and giving them a roof and a purpose is, apparently, a bond that counts. The second thing was the weapon I'll be buried holding. At the biggest ironworks in the city, I picked up a dozen swords and put every one back, light as toys, snap in a fight flimsy, until I asked for the heaviest thing they had, and they hauled out of the warehouse a Mo Dao, a lost Tang Dynasty anti-cavalry polearm, 10 feet long, 50-jin, a 2-meter haft under a meter of blade, the kind of weapon that shatters man and horse in a single downstroke, and that no soldier has been able to swing in over 100 years because it takes a strong man to lift it. I'm 5 strong men now. I waved 50-jin around like a broom, and the master blacksmith himself put down his hammer because he'd never once seen a living person handle the thing. Great Liang is infantry country with a cavalry enemy to the north, the Khitan, which makes a horse-splitting Mo Dao the single most useful blade I could own. And the old master, seeing a man about to march off, gave it to me, free, with the only price a warrior ever really asks. Come back alive so I can watch the Mo Dao drink blood. I saluted him like the scholar's son I'm supposed to be and carried off my death scythe. I also scraped together a full set of Mingguang armor from the scrap piles, shoulder plates, skirt, breastplate, everything but a helmet, for under 3 taels of what should have cost 80 for Qin Ming to reforge into mine. The Mo Dao got to drink on the walk home. 8 bandits boiled out of the woods on a lonely stretch, the scarred leader already grinning about the woman and the meat, and I set down 180 jin of supplies, drew the polearm, and let my whole bearing drop the farmer act. First man they sent, a cautious ex-soldier who circled instead of charging, I split diagonally from shoulder to hip in one stroke, his own lunch spilling out onto the road. The next rush lost 2 heads to a single sweep. A third died before the survivor's nerve broke, and 4 of them scattered into the trees where a 10-foot blade can't follow. First blood for the Mo Dao. 6 tails and 4 military knives off the corpses, and one very pale Qin Ming walking the rest of the way home in a daze, revising every assumption she'd made about the old farmer who'd bought her. I keep telling people I found things lying around. The road, today, left 4 bodies lying around, too. Home was in mourning. White cloths hung on the houses that had gotten their men back as corpses, the Lin sisters off helping neighbors bury the dead, and I slid Qin Ming in with a gentle cover story. A maid, since 3 fallen noble daughters shouldn't be scrubbing floors, that was kind enough to move them, left silver and the looted knives behind for the household's defense, and watched my 3 sharp wives quietly clock that the broke old hunchback they'd married a month ago now comes home strong, rich, armed, trailing rescued strangers and a legendary blade, having personally killed 4 bandits on a 10-mile stroll. My husband, Zhang Shouying said, in the tone of a woman recalibrating, has changed a lot these days. Lady, you have no idea. And neither do I, because the army hasn't even seen me yet. The armored woman finally told me who she was, and it turned the stakes up a mountain. She's not a 6th-rank commander of 500. She's an army master, commander of 2,500. And she got shredded because on the road to her own camp, she and 4 fellow commanders were ambushed by their own side. The other 4 died. She's the survivor of a top-level purge, the exact meat grinder that beheaded my wife's father, and she came to me with a deal. Get her smoothly into the army, and she'll make me a duto, a leader of 100 men, at minimum, the moment she reclaims her command. My heart absolutely leapt, because that rank is my ceiling dream, the level where you stop being a body they mail home in pieces. And then my brain caught up and pulled the reins. A woman who got 4 6th-rank officers murdered is a woman whose allies die, and a broke farmer openly backing her is a farmer with a very short future. So I played it cold. I'll help you heal, and nothing public, and gave her half my 30-year ginseng to speed it, an investment, not a loyalty oath. She looked at me like I'd grown a second head, because most peasants would have kowtowed at the word duto, and I was the one counting the ways it could get me killed. You're even smarter than I thought, she said. I'm not smart, lady. I just read the last page of one story already. I'm not dying early in this one. Her plan for the army was pure opera. She'd disguise as a man and enlist right alongside me, a frontier Mulan, and pretend she'd never met me. Great Liang doesn't let women soldier, logistics only, which out here means the same brothel wagon fate the sisters escaped. So a wrecked army master smearing dirt on her face and marching in as a nobody was, honestly, the safest move she had. Fine. Don't know me at the camp, I told her, and I never gossip. I'm 50. I've kept a village's worth of secrets. And I got her name at last. Zhang Yufei, a different Lin, no blood to my wives, though her family too tangles with the same prime minister who's the thread running under this whole world. She wouldn't say how high her house sits, filed away with all the rest. But the best thing she gave me, she didn't mean to. She demonstrated her boxing once, slow, precise, 13 years of external martial arts in one form, and I watched it with the same system-sharpened senses that see silver through dirt, etched every motion into my head, stepped up, and did it back. First try. My fist cracked the air with a little sonic boom, and Zhang Yufei, an army master who's killed more men than my whole village has people, actually flinched. Have you learned this before? No? I don't believe you. Believe it or not. Turns out that whatever this cheat is, it doesn't just find treasure and reverse my age. It lets me steal a lifetime of martial training off a single demonstration. I've got the raw strength of 5 men and, apparently, the ability to copy any technique put in front of me. The hunchback who couldn't stand up fast a month ago is quietly becoming the most dangerous thing on this frontier, and nobody's noticed, because they're all too busy laughing at the old man with the pretty wives. Qin Ming reforged the scrap Mingguang armor into a real suit, cut her fingers bloody on it, never complained, just smiled, because for the first time, she felt safe. And when I put it on, the transformation was complete. The drooling, pants-wetting corpse the village pitied a month ago now stood in a general's armor, looking, the sisters agreed, like Zhou Yu stepped out of the 3 Kingdoms. Scholar's face, 4-man body, legendary blade, a hunted army master for an ally. And 3 days before I marched, the household delivered the payoff the whole system had been driving at. All 3 sisters, pregnant. The Li family line, the thing my death clock demanded, the thing that's kept resetting my lifespan, was finally, actually continuing. I forced 10 tails on Wang Xian for the road ahead, sent Zhang Yufei off to the county town early to enlist separately before any villager could recognize the face I'd carried home against my chest, and squared up to march. A dying nobody with 1 month to live had, in that month, built a clan, An heir, a fortune, a legend's weapon, and a body out of nothing. Now the army wanted its soldier. Time to go find out how far a cheat that runs on family carries a man in a war that mails his neighbor's home in boxes. Before I left, Wanyan sketched the real map of this world for me, and it's uglier than any battlefield. Jiang Yufei, she figured, is kin to the commander of the Imperial Guards, a fifth-rank officer on paper who actually holds real military power and the emperor's ear, a house known to have exactly one heir, a son. Which means Jiang Yufei has quite possibly been living as a man her whole life, the family's secret blade. And the reason 5 army masters were riding to this frozen nowhere and got ambushed? Because up here, the emperor is a rumor. Northern Liang runs on military governors, warlords who are more emperor than the emperor. The military commissioner of Yozhou alone holds 16 prefectures, like a private kingdom where the throne's writ doesn't reach. 5 commanders arriving together is 100,000 troops worth of leverage, enough to challenge, or usurp, a military governor. Wanyan's own father, a censor, was destroyed for the crime of telling the court out loud that the Yozhou commissioner was a tyrant. So the woman in my spare room isn't fleeing bandits. She's the survivor of a chess move against a warlord king, and I've adopted her into my mud hut. Use her. Don't get close to her, Wanyan warned. And she's right, but I made one quiet promise anyway. When I have power, real power, I'm getting my father-in-law out of that prison. He's, roughly my age. This is going to be a weird family reunion. In this world, Wanyan said, everything but military might is meaningless, so I'll go get some military might. The morning I marched, the whole village walked me to the gate in tears. Even the village chief sent his own second son, Wang Jinbao, who'd bullied his way onto the roster overnight, demanding glory. Establish the career, then the family, said the kid who's never held a woman's hand, to great applause from nobody. 11 of us from Li family village, and me, the gray-haired grandfather of the group they'd all quietly started calling Young Master, because a man who married 3 beauties, kept a maid, and got younger doing it, clearly knows something. I told the weeping crowd the only thing worth telling them: leave with a smile, come back with a smile. Then I picked up 180 jin of gear on a Mo Dao slung across my shoulders like a carrying pole and walked 11 miles into the sunrise, while boys half my apparent age wheezed and lagged, wondering aloud how the old man wasn't tired. Combat strength 6, kid. Don't ask about the adults' business. The county town's enlistment was a strength test, and it turned my debut into a coronation. 10 stone piers out in the yard, 40 jin up to 280, lifted clean overhead, not just hug it. The young men strained and grunted. Strong, honest Wang Jianfeng topped out around 130, Wang Jinbao around 100, and nearly crippled his own legs before I caught the falling stone one-handed. Then it was my turn, and I walked up the line like a man reading a menu. 40, 70, 100, lifted like a bundle of reeds while the watching soldiers straightened up. 160, one-handed. 220, I took my shoes off first, out of respect for my footwear, held it overhead, and set it down. The commander himself, a scarred 30-something in Mingguang armor who'd obviously killed his share, finally leaned forward. Lift the 250 for 5 taels of silver, lift the 280 for the silver and a squad leader's rank. So I hoisted the 250, and then I picked up the 280 jin stone off the ground with my gut, held it over my head, and slammed it down into a crater, deep enough to spill the tea off the commander's own table. Day 1, first hour. And I walked out of that yard a squad leader among the recruits, with 5 taels in my pocket, while behind me, the commander's officers murmured the thing every veteran can smell on another killer. That old man has taken lives. I even named his rank on sight, which peasants can't do, which unsettled them further. Good. Let the men who mail villages home in boxes wonder about the grandfather who outlifted the yard. 2 things nagged at me on the way out. Jiang Yufei was nowhere in the lineup, vanished into her own disguised plan. And an official came scrambling to the commander, white-faced. The roster read 499, 1 recruit dead of plague, and the military order said not a single man missing. Make up the number by sundown or face a court-martial. A missing slot, a hunted army master in hiding, and a war machine that executes officials over a rounding error. I had a feeling those loose threads were about to tie themselves into a knot right in front of me. They did. The missing 500th recruit walked up to claim the last slot for 300 coins, filthy as a beggar, chest-bound flat under rope. Jiang Yufei, hiding a wrecked army master inside the exact roster that a court-martial was demanding be filled. She slid into the army through the crack in its own paperwork and landed, of course, in my camp, which turned into a gift, because when my squad leader, a gruff, favor-dangling man named Li Wei, who'd already decided I was talented and started hinting at a deputy officer's slot for me, told each squad leader to pick up to 12 subordinates, I grabbed my own. All 11 Li family village men, plus Jiang Yufei. Uncles and nephews raid tombs together. You only trust your own blood on a frontier. That first night in a tent, with nothing but damp grass on the floor, little Wang Jinbao crept over, clutching a ragged, patched baby blanket, the exact one I'd gifted him at his birth, which the boy has apparently refused to give up his entire life, and now denies owning while sleeping with it in a war camp. He snuggled into my side like a puppy, no matter how many times I pushed him off, drooled through my shirt by morning, and I lay there, a strong, rich, secretly monstrous grandpa, being used as a body pillow by a homesick kid, thinking, this is the army. Then the training started, and my modern brain turned every drill into a flex. First, a rapid march, 6 miles round trip to a hilltop flag in 15 minutes. Finish and eat dry rice, fail and drink thin porridge, all on an empty overnight stomach. The 3 other squad leaders, Zhao Tong, Chen Lei, Wu Yang, bolted off the line of the sprint to prove themselves, and I did the opposite. Zhang Yufei and I hung dead last, jogging and chatting, because you never burn your whole tank before the fight. Right on cue, the sprinters gassed out one by one, and around the 3-mile mark, the slow old man started passing bodies, then passed the leaders. Then he and Zhang Yufei flashed the final 50 feet like lightning and crossed exactly as the hourglass ran dry, the only 2 to finish in time. The sprinters screamed we'd cheated. Xu Wei shut them down cold and spelled out the lesson they'd missed. The test was never speed, it was energy allocation. A real battle runs from dawn to dusk, and the soldier who empties himself in the first mile is a corpse by noon. I'd known that in my bones before the whistle blew, because I've read the manual of a whole other world. Reward? I got waved over to the squad leader's food, where I learned the frontier's rank system is written in grain. Common soldiers eat corn rice porridge. Squad leaders get dry rice. Dutu get wheat and millet. The commander eats pure refined wheat. Every rung buys you a better meal, which is the entire reason a starving army fights at all. One day, sir, you'll be eating refined wheat, I told Xu Wei, which is how you promise a man you'll help him rise without saying the word promotion out loud. And he beamed and slipped me half his own dried vegetables. But the real masterstroke was the book. That afternoon, Xu Wei demonstrated battlefield swordsmanship, 2-3 moves max, every one a killing blow, no flourishes. And I lost my mind, clapping, hands over my head, eyes wet like I was watching the sunrise, until the whole tent caught on and gave the illiterate squad leader the standing ovation of his life. Then I did the thing that actually locked him as my patron. I pulled out paper and brush, scholar's son, I can write, which almost nobody here can, and started recording his every gruff quote like scripture. On the battlefield, the most important thing is a fierce aura, and pitched him the idea that I'd compile his sayings into a printed book, his name on the cover, distributed to every soldier in the camp before basic training ends. Xu Wei, a man who can write exactly 2 things, his own name and his boss's, nearly levitated. Am I going to publish a book? You are, sir. And just like that, the most powerful man over my head became a man who owes his newfound authorship to me. And I ate dry rice twice in one day, while the whole camp went green. Because the fastest promotion in any army isn't the one you earn, it's the one your flattered superior hands you. Only Zhang Yufei got the short end that night. A squad leader's rations don't reach and nobody recruit, and she drank porridge. And when the midnight rain came and the tent floor turned to cold mud, her half-healed internal injuries flared and left an army master, of all people, pacing and shivering, because she was too proud and too injured to warm herself. I don't leave a useful ally to freeze on the ground, so I hauled her under my blanket and pinned her still against the cold, whether she liked it or not. Comrade to comrade, nothing more. Because a frozen commander is a dead investment, and I intend to collect on this one. She struggled, gave up, and stayed warm. In the army, you entrust your back to the people beside you. I just happened to have picked the most dangerous back on the whole frontier to guard. The camp settled into a rhythm I bent entirely to my advantage. Every dawn, I slipped behind a hill to drill 9 sets of boxing and 9 of the Mo Dao, where no one could copy me. The training itself feeds the genealogy, so muscle memory and combat strength climb together. And every morning, the treasure scents turned up loose silver in the dirt, including a piece Xu Wei himself was walking around, head down, searching for, while I quietly stepped on it and pocketed it behind his back. Then, on the first half-day off, I ran the patron play to its natural conclusion. I invited Xu Wei to a feast in the city and walked him past every restaurant a squad leader could afford, past the captain's place, straight to Chunlanju, the most expensive house in town where only a duto dares eat. The whole walk a promise that I saw him higher than his rank. I laid on the best food and wine, paid for, naturally, with battlefield corpse silver and the coins Xu Wei never found. Told him I might die at the front, so let me repay your kindness while I still can, and made an illiterate frontier squad leader feel, for one afternoon, like a lord. Then I packed every leftover in oiled paper and hauled it back to camp for my village boys, Wang Cai and Cheng Hua and the rest, who swarmed it like starving pups and ate with sharpened twigs for chopsticks, while I watched the kids I'd known since they were naked toddlers and wondered, quietly, how many would walk home from this war standing up. Jiang Yufei, who eats nothing and smells suspiciously of perfume for a man, got needled by me in front of the whole camp about visiting the girls, until her gruff soldier's voice cracked an octave, and she fled, a small revenge for all her disdain, and a reminder to her that a disguise is only as good as the person who agrees not to poke it. The favor economy paid off exactly as designed. My whole squad kept running the energy allocation drill nobody else bothered with, and day after day I finished first, Jiang Yufei second, little Wang Cai third, all three of us eating solid food at Xu Wei's table, while the other three squad leaders, Zhao Tong, Chen Lei, Wu Yang, coasted, slacked, and quietly torched their own futures. Because a squad leader who won't outthink a foot race won't be a squad leader long. Xu Wei said nothing and understood everything. Zhao Tong's crew was finished, and I was on a line toward captain. A month blurred past in swordsmanship, mounted archery, and combined attack drills, and then the other shoe dropped. Basic training is supposed to run 2.5 to 3 months. On day 30, Xu Wei pulled me aside, eyes darting, and told me the thing he'd deny ever saying. The front is collapsing, we deploy early, and green recruits sent in a month undercooked, our gap filler, polite army, for cannon fodder. 3 days leave, first month's pay of 500 coins, and then a war none of us were ready for. I looked at Wang Cai's homesick face and thought, kid, you should never have come. So I spent my 3 days home like a man who might not get another. The village had transformed my mud hut into a going concern, the yard buried in drying herbs, because Jiang Shouying, it turns out, is skilled enough to be opening a clinic. Treat the villagers, bring in income, and buy the household protection all at once, which is exactly the kind of quiet institution building I'd have designed myself. I told her she'd be the most famous doctor in 3 counties by the time I came back, and I meant it. I stocked her herb supply from the mountain, bought a mountain of pork for a family that would soon be 4 women and 3 babies, and sat at a full table with a pregnant household that wouldn't be showing until I was already at the front. The children I'd fathered into existence to reset my own death clock, growing while I marched off to maybe die for real. Nobody said the quiet part. Jiang Yixuan just kept hoping out loud that surely the army wouldn't send an old man to the killing line. She hadn't done the math I'd already done. The army doesn't send old men to die. It sends bodies. And I'd made myself the most capable body on the entire frontier, which means when the fighting's worst, they're going to point me straight at it. Sure enough, the war didn't wait. When leave ended, over a dozen of the 500 recruits didn't come back, self-crippled or vanished, the front's reputation having leaked, and the whole officer chain got flogged for it. The commander, Qin Fang, a genuine martial artist, docked his own month's pay and shattered a hardwood table with 1 palm strike to make the point. And in the shuffle, Zhao Tong lost his squad for coming up a man, and Jiang Yufei got promoted to squad leader in his place, a wrecked army master climbing back up the ladder she'd fallen off, though I flagged the danger to her. Rise to Duto, and someone above starts asking who you really are. Then Qin Fang did the thing that told me exactly what kind of war this is. He ordered the march to the front that night, under cover of dark, specifically so his own men couldn't run and enemy scouts couldn't count us. An army that has to sneak away from its own recruits is an army that knows it's marching them to slaughter. An hour in, a deserter slipped off, pretending to piss, and Xu Wei sent my squad to run him down. A month of distance running meant we caught him easy, Cheng Hua tackling, Wang Cai tying him. They dragged him into a torchlit circle in front of the whole army, and Qin Fang gave a 1-word sentence. Slay. And then, Xu Wei looked at me. My village boys couldn't do it. Arresting a man is one thing, opening his throat is another, and their hands shook. So it fell to me, and I looked at a terrified kid kowtowing his forehead bloody, begging, and thought only that he was a fool. You cripple yourself before you're on the roster, or you don't run at all, but you never desert in front of a martial artist commander who's already lost a table to his own temper. 1 clean stroke. His body came off his head, blood across the recruits' faces in the firelight, and the army stepped over the corpse and marched on, leaving it for the jackals. Nobody whispered the rest of the night. That's the lesson the frontier teaches on the way to its first battle. The army will kill you for running long before the enemy gets the chance, so the only exit is forward, and forward is where I've been pointed the whole time. By dawn, we reached Yozhou City, 30,000 souls behind high walls on the Khitan border, 10 armies and 25,000 troops, the beating heart of the whole prefecture. It should have held 50,000. A generation of war had bled it to 1/3 of itself. In the history I carry from another life, this city becomes the Liao Empire's southern capital, 300,000 strong, one of the 16 prefectures the Central Plains spends centuries trying to win back. Right now, it's a dwindling frontier town trading furs and tea with the very Khitan it's at war with. Because war and commerce are just two ways to get the resources you don't have, and only the distant court is naive enough to be scandalized by it. Our army turned out to be 2,500 green recruits crammed 100 to a house down a cleared-out residential alley, commanded by a man newly promoted, which is army arithmetic for fodder led by fodder. Li Wei kept promising I wouldn't be thrown at the front raw. I'd observe a battle or two first, which is the exact soothing lie you tell men you're about to spend. The one upside, the beheading made me a made man among my peers. Chen Lei and Wu Yang, who a month ago outran me and called me a cheat, now crowded up, wide-eyed, asking what it felt like to cut a man in half, begging the old hometown brother to guide them when the blood starts, terrified they'll freeze at the sight of it. Jiang Yufei helpfully informed them I'd killed before. I clarified, bandits, and watched two squad leaders decide the safest place on a battlefield is next to the grandpa who doesn't flinch. Demoted Zhao Tong watched from the edge of it all, no longer laughing with anyone. And then the cooks handed out dry rice, the ration you feed men right before you send them to die, because you want strength in their arms when the arrows come. No one had to say it. Battle was days away, maybe less, and I'd walked 2,500 boys who trust me straight into the mouth of it. But there's a rule about frontier towns. The night before the dying starts, everybody drinks. Li Wei took his squad leaders out to a tavern, soldiers everywhere, curfew at 7, flogging for stragglers, and we'd barely claimed a window seat when a rival squad leader named Zhao Feng stomped upstairs to steal our table on the grounds that he'd enlisted 3 days before Li Wei. 3 days. He said it like it was 3 dynasties. Li Wei, furious at being disrespected in front of fresh recruits, stood up, ready to brawl, and the whole tavern of off-duty soldiers leaned in for the show, because nothing feeds a garrison like 2 officers about to embarrass themselves. So they cut a deal, 1 man each, 1 round. Winner keeps the table, loser gets out. Li Wei was suddenly delighted, because he had a secret weapon, me. Zhao Feng's champion was Sun Yong, a slab of a man with a fresh battle scar, the kind you only earn by outliving the guy who gave it to you. And then, because soldiers can't watch 2 men fight without turning it into a stock exchange, the betting started. Zhao Feng slaps down 3 taels, 3 months' pay, on Sun Yong. And here's where I stopped being a recruit and started being a problem. I put down my whole 5 taels on myself, then went around the table shaking people down like a loan shark at a funeral. Borrowed Li Wei's last tael. We'll split it. Got stonewalled by Chen Lei and Wu Yang pleading poverty, and then went to Jiang Yufei, who, thanks to her 20 jiang treasure sense, is quietly the richest person in any room she stands in and walks around with silver nuggets in her sleeves. "Lend me 10, I said. "Half the winnings if I win." She squinted. "You know I have money?" I said, "Stop talking and hand it over. We have a relationship." And she paid up out of pure second-hand embarrassment. 21 taels on a 51-year-old man they all think is 40. Zhao Feng scrambled to cover it and came up short. Round 1. Sun Yong charged. To me, he was moving through syrup. I sidestepped the punch, borrowed his own momentum, gave him the gentlest little shove, and physics carried him clean out of the circle before a single blow landed. One on a technicality that was really just superior everything. Li Wei nearly levitated. Zhao Feng, with the specific shade of a man watching 3 months' salary walk out a window, and screamed that it didn't count, that I was tricks, no real skill, rematch, bet again. And that's when I spotted the gold gleaming inside his coat. Treasure sense doesn't turn off, and decided this pigeon had more feathers. I played weak. "I'm no match for you, sir. I won't compete," while raking in 90 taels, 4 times my stake, purring. It drove him insane. He wanted the rematch so bad he was gritting his teeth, so I made him bleed for it. No money, no game. So Zhao Feng reached for the one thing on the frontier worth more than gold. "Bring me the Tia Futu." The tavern gasped. Even Sun Yong flinched. "Sir, no." Because Tia Futu is kitten heavy cavalry armor, 80 pounds of sword-proof iron plate, maybe 100 or 200 sets in existence, worth more than a suit of bright light armor, and Zhao Feng's set had cost 7 dead brothers to capture, 10 men against 1, and it was the honor of every survivor's promotion. It was the trophy his whole rank was built on, and he was about to bet it on a man he'd already lost to once. My eyes turned to little stars. Bright light armor's flashy, but it screams "look at me" for a recruit. Tai Futu was built for a soldier. File off the enemy markings, and I could wear it into 100 men and walk out the other side. 1 cavalryman in a full set charges 100 infantry. 10 of them break a battalion. 100 break an army. 1,000 break a country. And Zhao Feng was staking his on a coin flip because his pride couldn't take a loss. I went all in. Round 2. Sun Yong came in smart, cautious, testing, backing me toward the edge inch by inch, and for a second, even I was working. He committed to a sweeping kick. I caught the leg, and here's the knife edge. One kick from his other foot, and I'm crippled or dead. Instead, I spun him, centrifugal force pinning his own weight so he couldn't push off, and launched him out the door to roll in the street. Twice. Nobody's that lucky twice, and the tavern finally understood. The old man wasn't lucky, the old man was hiding. Hundreds of taels in gold and silver, and the armor money can't buy. Mine. And then, I did the smart thing with a room full of soldiers I'd just fleeced. I bought every one of the 100 of them a pot of wine. 30 taels, several families' yearly income, gone in one grand gesture. And just like that, the men who'd bet against me and lost decided I was the finest fellow they'd ever met, roaring "Brother Li," while Zhao Feng slunk out, too humiliated to stay. Xu Wei grabbed me, yelling he loved me to death. The squad tossed me in the air, and the tavern drank the frontier's oldest toast, to being alive tonight, since tomorrow's not promised to anyone marching north. I toasted back. I also now owned a suit of nation-breaking armor, and nobody in that room had the faintest idea what I was going to do in it. Sobered up, Xu Wei gave me the real number. Fewer than half of new recruits live out the year, and mine had trained a month instead of 3. So I did the math a squad leader does, a dozen village boys, my responsibility, most of them maybe not alive in 3 days, and spent a few more taels dragging wine and meat back to camp for the 40 starving farmers who'd never once had oil in their stomachs. Let a man who might die Thursday eat like a person on Tuesday. Xu Wei, bless him, made sure the credit landed on me instead of himself, and 40 men toasted squad leader Li over the best meal of their short lives. Then I snuck off to try on my new toy. 80 pounds of tia futu, and I barely felt it, until I picked up the Mo Dao too, and suddenly I'm hauling 130 pounds of iron. Here's the ugly arithmetic of my cheat. I've got the strength of 6 men, but strap the weight of 6 men's gear on me, and I'm right back to being one tired guy who moves slow. Tia futu's a horse flex, not a foot soldier flex. I wrapped it back up and stashed it. First battle I'd wear the lighter bright light armor, get my feet under me, save the nation breaker for when I had a war horse and open ground. That night, I learned the actual rules of the world I'm in. Jiang Yufei was quiet and pale, cramping, that time of the month, and murderously embarrassed that I'd noticed, pinching my thigh hard enough to relocate me when I asked. But at midnight, I put a hot palm on her aching stomach until she finally slept, and in the morning, tore clean cloth strips off my own spare clothes and marched them to the latrine wall while she coughed increasingly homicidal warnings at me, then dropped them on her shoulder and retreated before she committed murder over an act of kindness. She showed up to lunch like nothing happened. The woman's emotional control is a martial art of its own. And speaking of martial arts, I finally got the tech tree explained. I'd been punching the air every dawn, banging my bare back against a locust tree in the yard like a lunatic while the whole squad watched. And here's why. This world runs on Wu Dao cultivation, and I'm barely on the latter. Early skin refining realm. Grind that, and you hit copper skin. Ordinary blades struggle to reach bone through your clothes. Above that, bone refining. Iron bone, where your own body is armor and common arrows just bounce. Top of what I could even picture, blood refining, boiling blood realm, where your blood runs like a boiler and you can wear 80 pounds of tea futu and run 100 miles in a day. Jiang Yufei? Late skin refining and injured. The only reason those men who wrecked her didn't finish the job is that her refined body refused to die. So all those books I read in my old life? Useless. The path forward is, eat well, punch things, and let a tree beat the softness out of a scholar's back until the skin turns to copper. Cool. Love that for me. Then Xu Wei came back from the morning meeting wearing his serious face and drew the war on a table in spilled tea. Yo here. A few dozen miles north, Badaling, the walled mountain pass, and a 4-mile stretch of that wall already lost to the Khitan. An army dug in on either side of the gap and another below it. Retake the breach, or the Khitan pour onto the Yozhou plain. Lose Yozhou, and all of Great Liang lies open behind it. The recent price of that gap? 10,000 casualties, 20 battalions of 200, 1 full rotation already spent, and a second rotation would cross 1/5 losses, the number where an army's morale simply breaks. Us? Second echelon. Veterans hit the breach first wave. Our 2,500 green recruits follow, another 2,500 behind us as backup. Chen Lei whined about the unfair ordering until I pointed out the obvious. Last in eats the fewest arrows and reaps the easiest credit. So somebody's commander is out of favor upstairs, not just short-handed. Ahead of everyone, the fierce Tiger Battalion, led by an elite named Wang Yun, another Li, because apparently my surname is contractually obligated to be everywhere on this frontier. Departure? Tonight. One night's rest between a tavern brawl and a war. I packed light, issued saber, Mo Dao, bright light armor. No Tiefutu, because Bottoling's broken terrain would make 80 pounds of plate a coffin instead of a fortress. And as full dark came down, the squad leader's voices tore through the alley. Pack it up, move, move, move! And 2,500 boys who'd trained for 1 month stumbled into the street toward a wall that had already eaten 10,000 men. Same panic as the first night they left home. Except this time, home was behind 2 horizons, and the thing in front of us had a body count. Midnight. The Bottling camp. 7,000 men, half of them green as spring wheat, fed a half ration because a full belly is wasted on a corpse. Down in the main tent, the man running this whole meat grinder turned out to look like a private tutor. Bai Long, a fair-skinned, beardless scholar general who'd be teaching calligraphy if you took the armor off him, and who'd staked his own head on retaking the breach. His plan was arithmetic, with people as the units. Left and right armies hit the flanks, his personal Tiger Battalion hits the center, and then the fresh recruits get fed in as the wave that dies, so the wall gets held. When our former commander Chen Hao begged to soften it, add veterans, at least hand out the spare shields and helmets, Bai Long allowed the armor, but not the mercy. These men are here to fill a gap. Take it, and I'll get you rewarded. Fail, and my head rolls before yours does. Warmest pep talk on the frontier. Problem: 4 camps worth of spare shields and helmets only kitted out 1 battalion, so of course men started clawing each other for the gear that meant living. Li Wei dumped the pile on me to distribute, and I solved a fairness problem that has no fair answer. Shields and helmets go to whoever volunteers for the front. Everyone else falls back, unarmored, and lives longer for it. Glory hunters armor up and march into the arrows. Survivors step back. Balance achieved without a single fistfight. I took a helmet myself and put on my bright light armor to complete the set, which is when I nearly got myself arrested, because a general in full armor standing in the recruit line made Commander Qin Fang's eyes bug out. "Who is this? Take off your helmet!" Cue the panic that I'd looted a commander's plate, until I showed the patched-together seams and explained it was Pingan bargain bin armor, and Qin Fang, thinking fast, let me keep it. A general climbing the wall does wonders for morale. Every other camp squinted through the dark at the one armored figure in a recruit mob and decided the attack couldn't be hopeless if a general was charging it. I hadn't fired a shot, and I was already a morale poster. Then the wall taught us its manners. We crept into ambush position, and the Khitan, who'd correctly guessed we'd come at night, started firing blind probing rockets into the dark, and every so often you'd hear that wet thunk of one finding a body, a man's scream cut off by his own squad leader clamping a hand over his mouth and dragging him away silent. You do not get to cry out. You lie in the cold, eating other men's death noises, and wait for the arrow signal, because on a battlefield, nobody has a clock, only the shot from the rear that says, now, yin hour. The signal arrows flew. The Tiger Battalion threw iron hooks and ladders and went up like they were born on that wall. And the Khitan answered with rolling logs and boulders that turned the slope into a bowling alley with recruits for pins. First recruit battalion in, hands shaking too hard to climb, half of them falling off the ropes. 500 men gutted in 15 minutes. Second battalion hit the wall of blood and twisted limbs and broke, tried to run, and Han Xiang and his officers cut down the runners themselves, because a few hundred fleeing men will infect thousands behind them, and forward is the only direction that isn't instant death. Third battalion climbed on the corpses of the first 2. Fourth got pinned and stoned against the wall. This is the Great Wall, no gate to walk through. You climb or you die at the bottom. Half an hour, 1,000 casualties, and to the scholar general below, it was all going exactly to budget. 5th Battalion! Charge! Us. And I made a cold call. Scattering these boys just spreads the dying out, so stay behind me. Shield up, saber out, no Mo Dao. You don't bring a 5-foot blade to a ladder. And up I went. Stones hit my shield like meteors, and the ladder swayed, but 6 men's strength holds a ladder like a vine holds a wall, and I climbed deliberately, checking my village boys were on my tail. And here's the beautiful, ugly mechanic of war. The moment the other recruits saw one armored figure eating boulders and not falling, they abandoned every other ladder and rope and poured onto mine, a long human dragon queuing behind the tank, because soldiers aren't fools and they know exactly where survival is standing. I crested the wall, and the Khitan learned what I already knew. Their swords landed on me and did nothing, while mine took them apart. 2 dead in as many seconds, the ones around them flinching, and my boys spilled over the top and fanned out. Then it was just work. Hold the ladders, push right, link up with the right flank army, bind the breach to friendly troops on one side, and the wall is won. My saber went dull, and I grabbed a dead man's off the ground and kept going. Wang Jinbao ran a live scoreboard at my shoulder. 28, uncle! You've killed 28! the world's grimmest XP counter. Some Khitan climbed the back of the wall behind me where the boys couldn't see, mistook me for a high officer and lunged, and 3 of them died mid-air in Jiang Yufei's hands, because even injured and benched, she'd shadowed me up to clean the threats off my blind spot. Thanks, Brother Yingtai. Half an hour later, I heard friendly shouts ahead, the right flank army's torches waving, the surrounded Khitan either leaping off the wall or throwing down their swords, and the 4-mile breach that had eaten 10,000 men was ours, and the second new army never even had to be spent. Bai Long had planned for all 5,000 recruits to die. We handed him the wall with boys to spare. Final tally, per my personal accountant, 78. You counted? I counted for you, uncle. All right then. The excitement drained out of me and left just an exhausted 51-year-old holding a stranger's sword on a wall full of heads. Han Chang, who'd watched a mystery general stabilize a total collapse, demanded to know whose officer that was, and Qin Fang, grinning, claimed me, my new recruit squad leader. First to the wall got 2 ranks and 100 taels. I got 1 rank and 50 for turning a rout into a victory, contribution second only to the first climber. And then Han Chang said the smartest thing anyone said all night. He's brave, resourceful, qualified for captain, but nurture him slowly or the jealousy will bury him. Rise too fast on this frontier and your own side kills you cleaner than the Khitan. Then the order every siege ends with: cut the heads off the dead, hang them on the north wall. I'd walked in a nobody in patched armor. I climbed off that wall a ranked officer with 78 ghosts and a target on my back, and Qin Fang was already walking toward me with that look that means someone upstairs wants a closer look at you. He asked the count himself, 78, and went pale, because even standing still, lopping off 70 heads would exhaust a normal man. Then he did the thing that made every officer nearby sick with envy. He took off his own helmet and put it on my head. A commander's helmet means you've entered his sight, and men have made duto on less. I asked for one small favor back, a proper bright light helmet, since mine was a dented mismatch, and instead got the boss's. Then came the part of war nobody puts in the songs: looting. My treasure sense lit the battlefield up like a carnival, and I walked corpse to corpse pulling silver, a 10-tael ingot stamped late Tang, because the Khitan don't mine silver, they steal it, and had dozens of taels in my belt before the bodies cooled. War really is the fastest money on earth. The boys stripped partial armor off the dead, and then did the frontier's grim housekeeping. Heads off, hung on the north wall, a skull mound to teach the next Khitan what the neighborhood's like. The ledger, when it closed, 5,000 Khitan wiped out, exactly canceling the 10,000 they'd cost us before. And our side, Qin Fang marched 2,500 in and got 1,000 fit men back. 1,000 dead, 500 crippled who'd likely rot away by nightfall from infection. And the elite Tiger Battalion chewed down 500 too. 2,500 walked to that wall, 1,500 came back, 500 of those on planks. My village boys were the lucky ones, under a quarter lost, while other squads bled past half. That's what "we took the objective" looks like from the bottom. Outside Yozhou, the military governor himself, Zhao Zhixin, rode out to greet the victors and handed down the most chilling reward I've ever watched land. To Bai Long, the scholar general who just won the whole campaign, he said, "Congratulations, you're now prefect of Yozhou." 4th rank, a promotion on paper, and every general there went stiff. Because in Great Liang, a military man made civil official loses his army forever. He'd kicked his best commander upstairs into a desk to keep him from ever leading troops again. Bai Long bowed and thanked him, because what's the alternative? And I stood there in my recruit line, reading it plain. This governor uses a good blade and then locks it in a drawer. File that under things to remember about the man who signs my promotions. Then he turned that same smile on me and knew things he shouldn't. Knew my name, knew I was Li Family Village, Pinggan County, details that were not in the battle report, which meant the governor has informants threaded through his own officers, watching everyone, including Bai Long. So I gave him the performance he wanted, eyes brimming, voice shaking. "General, you remembered where I'm from," and drank his celebration wine with tears rolling down my face like the most loyal soldier who ever lived. Inside, I filed him next to every use and discard boss I'd survived in 2 lifetimes. He patted my shoulder, played the soldier-loving general for the recruits, and even let the wounded enter the city first, a man who understands exactly which gestures the crowd remembers. So do I. That's the problem. Back in the alley, the empty spaces did the talking. 7, 8 bunks that would never fill again. And by morning, the last of the badly wounded were dead in the courtyard shade. Because this world's medicine is basically, are you tough or not? But the merit came down too. I was Deputy Ya Zheng now, and my tiny Li family village had somehow produced 3 officers in one battle. Wang Jianfeng and Wang Jinbao both made squad leader, splitting our boys into 2 squads under men who'd grown up together. Xu Wei marveled at the feng shui, and that gave me the opening for my favorite long game move, the book. See, I'd been dangling it at Xu Wei for a month. Let me print your battle tactics, sir, distribute them army-wide. And now, I made it real. Walking into a city bookshop run by a scholar merchant named Ho Wenbo. I laid down my manuscript. He opened it, saw a scholar's brushwork on a soldier's tactics, and basically fell in love. I gave him my whole "civil rules the world in peace, the blade rules it in chaos" speech, and the man stood up and bowed, declaring I'd woken him from a dream, then announced he was abandoning the shop to join the army himself. He refused to charge me a copper to print 100 copies of the Yuzhou Army Tactical Manual, then turned around and tried to pay me dozens of taels for a live demonstration of my martial arts, which I clutched to my chest while performing the ancient art of refusing money you have absolutely no intention of not taking. And the manual's byline? Not just mine, Xu Wei as co-author. He can barely read. If a superior quizzed him on his own book, he'd die of shame, so I made it a partnership. Plus the captain, the duto, the commander, the governor. Because in an army where nobody moves until the man above them moves, you don't hoard credit, you spread it. Staple your name to everyone whose promotion pulls yours up the ladder behind it. I walked in a squad leader with a manuscript, and walked out a deputy Ya Zheng, a published author, a recruiter of literate men, and the owner of every officer's name in ink above me. Grandpa doesn't just climb the ladder. Grandpa signs everyone else's rung. Then Ho Wenbo bought me dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town, which, it turned out, he also owned. And the disgruntled young bookseller quietly revealed himself to be something a lot scarier. His family runs dozens of bookshops across all of Great Liang, which is a polite way of saying he sits on top of an intelligence network, and over the wine, he casually detonated the real map of this world. The court, he said, had sent 5 military commanders to reinforce Badaling, and they were ambushed at the Dingyozhou border. 4 dead, 1 vanished. And who benefits from the court's men never arriving? The same governor who then gets to blame the neighboring warlord for the killing. Gu laid it out like a man discussing weather. This whole region has been a law unto itself since the An Lushan rebellion. Warlord after warlord the throne can't actually control, and Great Liang's new Zhu family emperors inherited the exact rot that ate the Tang. Which is why Bai Long, a genuinely capable general who made the mistake of once serving at court, just got promoted into a cage. The realm, in short, is rotten straight through, and I'd just been handed a sweet, terrifying little bomb of an ally who has money, court connections, and reasons of his own I couldn't fully see. Naturally, I recruited him on the spot. Squad Leader Gu, coming soon. Meanwhile, the book detonated exactly where I'd aimed it. I set a little stall of copies at the mouth of the alley and waited for the right fish. And the right fish was Chen Hao, the new army commander, who strolled past, saw his own name on a book he'd never written, and came to investigate whether someone was impersonating him. The preface handled that, written by squad leaders Zhou Hongyu and Xu Wei, humbly summarizing the priceless experience of the great generals Chen Hao and Qin Fang. You get the idea. He read the actual contents, found real Yozhou tactics smartly reorganized into something genuinely useful, ordered his camps to train by it and keep it in-house, and then promoted Xu Wei to vice captain. Not for Badaling. For the book. Xu Wei, who'd only wanted to show off, stood there stunned that a stack of paper outran a bloody wall, then turned on me a look of such tender brotherly devotion that, and I quote my own instincts, my whole body clenched. Love you too, Liu. Now the army needed fresh bodies to replace the ones we'd fed to the wall, and since Yozhou's rich buy their way out of service, that means farmers. From the counties. So I volunteered for the recruiting run to Pinggan County, because Pinggan is home, and I'd been gone a month and a life-or-death battle, and wanted to lay eyes on my household and maybe move them behind Yuzhou's high walls, closer to the front, but far safer than an open village the Khitan could raid. We marched out at dawn and camped a night short of the village so the boys could hit the morning market with their battle silver and not come home to their starving families empty-handed. I put them up at an inn, bought them a proper hot meal and drink to unwind, first real rest after their first real killing. And while they ate, I pulled Jiang Yufei into a quiet room because I had questions and the noise made good cover. And she finally told me the truth under all of it. She'd fled Ding province to Yuzhou, and she and her people weren't refugees. They were infiltrators, here to take officer posts under Bai Long. Which meant Badaling's fall might have been no accident at all, but a gambit. Lose the wall, create a crisis, slip your people in through the reinforcement chaos. The 5 murdered court commanders, Bai Long's poisoned promotion, her own careful climb up the ranks, all the same board. If I didn't know you were a farmer since birth, she said, I'd think you worked for the governor. I told her the thing we both already knew, As long as the front keeps bleeding, the court can't touch its governor, so the fighting is the point, not the accident. And that all of it, top to bottom, was a court rotten enough that loyalty was a fool's currency. She didn't argue. She just said the only line that matters in an age like this. To survive, you climb. It's the only direction that isn't a grave. And for once, the murderous, guarded, half-broken infiltrator and the 51-year-old peasant with a soul from another world were looking at the exact same thing. She threw a quilt on the floor and told me if I came near her bed, I was a beast. I told her if I didn't, that made me worse than one, and enjoyed watching her turn furious and red over a joke. But under the banter, we just agreed on the only plan that keeps anybody alive here. Climb. Keep climbing. Don't stop until you're too high for any of these rotten men to reach. Next morning, I marched the boys home. Jiang Yufei peeled off to handle recruit intake at the county seat, and we hit the village by noon, and the kids started screaming, "Grandpa's back with the brothers," before we cleared the tree line. Old Li, the village chief, nearly fell over. I'd left a month ago a 51-year-old scarecrow, and here I was, a deputy Ya Zheng, with Wang Chai and Cheng Hua both made squad leaders, one tiny starving village, 3 officers. He kept misremembering my rank as duckhead instead of squad head, just to watch my eye twitch, which, fine, fair, I earned that. The other families swarmed their boys checking for wounds. Everyone had come home. That alone made us a legend in a valley used to conscription meaning goodbye. Then the home I'd left behind. The household, the women, and the maid I'm responsible for, 3 of them carrying children, hadn't gained an ounce in a month, because they'd spent it certain I was dead in a ditch somewhere. So I dumped a clinking bundle of battlefield silver on the table, told them there'd be meat and eggs every day from here on, and hit the wall this world builds around women. They wouldn't touch their chopsticks. Wouldn't eat until the man ate. Best food goes to the husband first, always, that's the rule. So I broke it, dropped an egg and a bowl of meat into every bowl, the maids included, and told them to eat with me, and to buy whatever they wanted from now on without asking my permission. And they burst into tears. Not sad tears, the stunned kind, because in a world that treats men like beasts and women like weeds, a man putting food in your bowl before his own is a thing they'd never once seen. I ate a whole meal across from 4 quietly crying people. Grandpa's kindness apparently registers as an emotional ambush. The sharpest of them, Zhang Shuying, took one look at the silver and diagnosed the entire realm from her kitchen. No wonder the court can never break the warlords. If soldiers can earn this fast, they'll be loyal to whoever pays them. Correct. And it's exactly why I wasn't spending a copper of my own anymore, now that Ho Wenbo was footing my bills. I told them to buy land, 30 mu minimum, because in a lean season, a starving neighbor sells his unripe field cheap, and land is the only wealth this world truly keeps. But when I offered to move them behind Yuzhou's high walls, Wanyan shot it down cold and right. Yuzhou's the Khitan's #1 target, and a besieged city with no water is a death trap, while a mountain village can just melt into the deep hills or run south when trouble comes. So they'd stay. I'd get rich, and someday we'd all go somewhere safe together, but not into the walls the enemy wants most. And that dawn, after my 9th set of forms, the system rewrote itself in my skull. Because that's the engine under this whole story. I don't level from monsters, I level from family, the genealogy ledger turning bonds into raw strength. Clan Chief, Zhou Hengyu. Combat strength, 7. 7 grown men. Talent, 20-foot treasure hunt. Expected lifespan, 61. Offspring, none. 7 now. Climbing about a man of strength every month and a half, a year turns me into 8 men, 10 years into 80. But that lifespan number just sat there, stubborn and cruel, and it carries the ugliest fine print the system's got. If it stagnates, the child comes due too early. The genealogy feeds my life off my family growing and thriving, which means every mouth I protect, every field I buy, every kid safe through a winter isn't just sentiment. It's literally how long I get to live. Grim arithmetic. But it does make the mission simple. Keep them alive, keep them fed, keep them safe. And the ledger keeps me breathing long enough to matter. Which is why the recruiting run mattered more than filling a quota. I didn't want the leftover boys other villages hand over. Too young, too old, too soft. I wanted hunters. So I aimed us at Wang Family Hollow, a big, self-sufficient village buried up a mountain. 1,000 people who'd been dodging conscription for years by simply being unreachable. Men who track and kill for a living. Exactly the trustworthy core an army gets built around. I'd taught up there 15 years ago. I knew the broken trail. 7, 8 miles that felt like 15, no real road, until the valley finally opened, and Wang Jinbao gasped at how big the place was, and Cheng Hua pointed at the smoke over the rooftops and said, "Look, midday cooking fires. They must be doing well." Except I've lived 2 lifetimes, and I know what cooking smoke looks like. That wasn't it. Fire! Fresh footprints, screaming somewhere ahead, a village mid-slaughter. I put the boys behind trees on instinct, crawled the approach, took the first sentry from behind with a hand over his mouth and a diagram through his throat. And what I found on that rooftop was the ugly signature of what bandits do to a village that can't fight back. Dead villagers left where they'd been cut down. I didn't linger on it. I got cold instead. Because with a 20-jang treasure sense, every raider in that village was a lit lantern to me. And 10 quiet men who can see the enemy through walls turn a massacre into a hunt. We cleared the outposts first, so nobody could hit us from behind. Inside the picture, 600 or 700 villagers packed into the walled ancestral hall, and only 60-odd bandits holding them there. But 60 organized killers pinning 700 terrified farmers, choking on heat and smoke, is all it takes. Their leader, a thug named Guo Lao-chi, bellowed his terms at the walls. Every household coughs up silver, grain, and their women, or he burns them all alive. And here's the sick part. Inside those walls, the village was tearing itself apart, a surrender faction ready to hand over their own daughters against a fight-or-die faction. The clan chief's authority gone the instant he wavered, farmers killing farmers while the bandits waited. That's the real weapon of a raid. Terror does your work for you. Guo Lao-chi, by the way, was the exact bandit who'd robbed me at the start of all this, dozens strong now, where he'd been a handful 2 months back, which tells you how fast this world is rotting. The villagers cracked first in the good direction. A flung kitchen cleaver took a bandit through the skull. Then a dozen more came sailing off the wall, and we hit them from behind in the same breath. And 2 seconds in, I understood what these bandits really were. They covered each other. They maneuvered. Not brigands, roving soldiers. Yuzhou army deserters. Guo Lao-chi took one look at my uniform and gaped. The farmer he'd robbed was now an officer, wading through his men like a scythe through wheat. 3 dead before they grasped that martial artist is a word with consequences. His own blade shattered on mine, and he scrambled for the back, while my village boys howled in behind me, and the side with 60 men lost to the side with 10. Cornered, under 10 men left, Guo Lao-chi did what his type always does, dropped to his knees, and started selling. And what he sold was the whole rotten map. To buy his life, he spilled it. His men were the deserters who'd ambushed the court's 5 reinforcement commanders in Yiwu territory. 4 dead, 1 fled, orders to leave no survivors, which is why they couldn't go home, and turned bandit. But the bigger secret was the one that made my blood go still. Badaling didn't just fall. Someone on the inside pulled the garrison off a key beacon tower and opened the door for the Khatan. And that someone was Han Chiang. The same Han Chiang who then bled and screamed, retaking the wall like a hero. Which flipped the whole board over in my head. Bai Long looks like the court's planted man and got purged for it. But the court's real knife was Han Chiang the entire time. The governor thinks he outplayed the throne. The governor got played. Then Guo Lao-chi asked if I'd let him go, and I asked him a question back. Do you know who keeps a secret forever? I had my hand on his throat before the answer landed. Only the dead, and snapped his neck, blood out of all 7 openings. The rest begged, the rest died. The alley went quiet in a dozen breaths. And then I did the careful thing. Heads off, buried separately, their true faces gone. Because if anyone ever learns those bandits were the deserters who murdered the court's commanders, and that I know it, I'm a loose end the governor tidies up. Some knowledge you survive only by hiding that you have it. The loot came to 201 taels, and here's where I bought something worth more than silver. Loyalty. 100 taels to Wang family hollow, 50 to the families that had lost someone, 50 split by head count, 51 for me, the rest across my 10 boys. A whole clan on its knees, kowtowing to the Yuzhou army's righteousness. And when I posted a deliberately gentle conscription notice, 1 man in 3, 50 young hunters stepped forward when I needed a dozen, way over quota. Exactly the strong, grateful, trustworthy core an army gets built from. And then the clan chief looked at my face, and something ancient shook loose. Wang Chongyuan, 3 years my senior, hadn't seen me in 20 years, squinted, and I gave him the key. Remember the private tutor who came to teach your children to read, near 20 years back? His eyes went wide. He slapped his thigh. Brother Hung Yu! Marveling that he'd aged into an old man, while I still didn't look 40. And the recruits, the 50 young hunters, they were my students. The boy with the mole between his brows who read fast, Wang Tung, I'd given him his formal name. The one who spent a whole year failing to memorize the 3-character classic, Wang Lin, still sheepish about it. A hall full of young men laughing through the day's grief because their old teacher remembered every one of them. 20 years ago, I taught in this hall for a single year before the warlords crowned themselves and the exams collapsed and the world caught fire. And now those same children were my soldiers. Clansmen and students, in a rotten age, the only two kinds of people you can trust. I looked at Wang Tung's iron stare and thought, that boy doesn't have the bearing of a soldier, he's got the bearing of a prince. I sat there, a 51-year-old man who dropped into this world as a child and watched the last light of the Tang gutter out into chaos. The whole Five Dynasties era only lasts 53 years, and I have nearly outlived it already. Time really does bolt past like a white horse through a crack in the wall. But grief doesn't feed an army, so I put my new students to work, and on the way down the mountain, I noticed their machetes cut bowl-thick trees in 3 strokes, far better steel than our army knives. Wang Tung, you forged these yourselves? There's an ore pit up the ridge, he said. Iron in the rock, charcoal in the kilns. And every hair on my neck stood up. Because in this world, the court monopolizes exactly 2 things, salt and iron. Salt controls what people eat. Iron controls what people make and fight with. We reached a pit tens of feet across, walls streaked rust red, and I licked a pinch of the powder and tasted it. Prime iron oxide, a mountain of it, hidden, off every map the throne keeps. How, I asked, very quietly, did you find this place? They'd stumbled on it years back, burning charcoal, pulled iron out of the ash, and told nobody, because a mountain village that talks about its iron gets its iron taken. Smart. I said nothing, filed it under later, and walked off that ridge, already building a foundry in my head. Back home, the legend had outrun me again. The boy's tale of Grandpa dropping 60 bandits made half the village suddenly desperate to enlist. 7 or 8 more youths turning up that night, begging to be my personal guards. I told them I wasn't grand enough to have guards yet, and that war kills. And they told me the truth of the age right back. Plague, bandits, empty granaries. We're joining so we can eat. Fair. So now I had near 20 of my own clan's young men and 50 students riding on my judgment, which is a lot of boys to keep breathing, and I felt every one of them. And then, moving my late father's boxes into the new house, I found out who I actually am. Under his old clothes and books, at the very bottom of a 200-pound chest, was a crown, 9 tassels, and beneath it a robe, black over red, embroidered with sun, moon, stars, and dragons. You do not put a dragon on your clothes in an ordinary house unless you want your whole family executed. Jiang Xiaoying took one look drying her herbs and went white. Those are a Tang prince's ceremonial robes. And then a gold seal, tortoise-knobbed, and 4 characters carved in its base. Seal of Prince Kui. My father's name was Wang Wei. Prince Kui was Wang Wei, the 4th son of Emperor Taizong of Tang. I'm a history nerd. I knew the man died at 20, childless, in a suspiciously tidy way, and now I'm holding his crown in a peasant hut with my legs shaking. I went to the village chief and read the family genealogy under the excuse of naming my unborn child, and there it was, in ink. My father entered this Zhao County Li line as a stepson of unrecorded origin, not blood of this village. A prince, hidden inside a farming clan that happened to share the same ancient Li ancestor as the Tang emperors themselves. Let me say what that means, because it reorganized the entire board I've been playing on. It's the year 920, the 5 dynasties, and the throne belongs to the Zhu family that murdered the Tang. And I, a 51-year-old soul from another world in a dying peasant's body, turn out to be the adopted heir of a Tang prince, holding regalia that in the right hands is a restoration banner. The common people out here still whisper the Tang emperor's name, not the Zhu usurpers. Jiang Xiaoying, who I'm now certain married a peasant and got a chancellor's brain thrown in, laid it out cold. Keep the robes buried, stay a humble Yojo officer for now, but get 10,000 elite troops under you, and a man with that seal can raise the prince's banner like Wang Yang of Jin and rally a broken country to his side. The Yojo army isn't my job, it's my nest. My genealogy system feeds me strength and years off my growing family. The seal feeds me a claim. Bloodline and blood right, the same engine. Grandpa didn't just get a cheat and a sword. Grandpa got a dynasty to put back together. I reburied all of it under the bed and tried to remember how to breathe. Meanwhile, the cheat kept screaming past everyone else's ceiling. Back at camp, Zheng Yufei grudgingly measured me and nearly swallowed her tongue. I'd hit mid-stage skin refining in under 2 months. It took her 3 years of agony to reach skin refining at all, and she's been stuck ever since. And when the 5 infiltrators arrived, she was the strongest of them at late stage, the rest still early and middle. And here's a farmer blowing past her while whining that it's too slow and could she please speed it up. She wanted to strangle me with her own chest bindings, and honestly, valid. The Wang family hollow machetes turned out to be beautiful, ugly things too. Straight, heavy-tipped blades that'd take a man's thigh off in one swing and, on horseback, cleave leather and cloth armor like paper. My future cavalry was quietly assembling itself out of hunters, students, and homemade steel. We marched the 80-odd new recruits back to Yozhou, and at the gate, the officer Cui Li, the same man who'd escorted my bride to the village and privately bet I wouldn't survive a month, stared like he'd seen a ghost promoted. Same face, completely different man. Alive, ranked, a war hero. He handed me back into the city, marveling that the old scarecrow had become this. Inside, the reorganization. My honest captain, Chen Cheng, Xu Wei, now vice-captain. The whole squad structure rebuilt after battling 8 so many officers. My captain's company alone, now 138 men, with the new blood folded in. I sat at the Dato's table, not eating until the Dato ate. The humble new deputy Ya Zheng with a spotless record, and a prince's crown hidden under a bed 2 counties away, and 80 boys who'd follow me anywhere, and a secret iron mountain, and a system quietly turning my family into an army's worth of strength. Nobody at that table had the faintest idea they were passing the rice to the man who might one day ask them to help him take back an empire. The Dato, for the record, ran that whole meeting at the speed of a man who hates chewing. 30 recruits shuffled to old Wang's undermanned company. The students split across teams. Business done. Bowls emptied in the time it takes to drink half a cup of tea. Efficient. Terrifying. Then I went to collect my scholar. How Wenbo had enlisted for real, showed up with his own armor and dry rations in a sack, tore up his old servant's indenture on the spot, and set the weeping man free to run the bookshop, and walked out without a backward glance. Very dramatic. Slightly undercut by the fact that 50-jin of gear nearly folded him in half after 10 steps. Because the man is a scholar who couldn't kill a chicken. I did not help him carry it. If you can't haul your own armor down a street, you'll die on a battlefield anyway. Better to learn that at the curb. He gasped the whole way and swore he'd run 6 kilometers in it within a month. I told him he'd be a hero if he could walk 3 miles in it without dying, and I hadn't even added the weight of a blade yet. Welcome to the army, squad leader Gu. Then, walking back from drilling recruits, where I was, as usual, the only martial artist in a crowd of farmers, because that talent runs maybe 1 in 100, a scrawny, one-eyed fortune teller stopped me in the road. My nephew moved to shoo him off. I asked him instead, half as a joke, when I'd die. And the old man said, "An officer's fate. You'll live past 60. And my pupils shrank. Because the genealogy ledger burned into the back of my skull says one number, 61. So I sent the boys home and bought the old Taoist dinner, because a man who guesses a secret only I can see is worth a meal. In a private room, I pushed him, "Prove it, tell me my background." And he looked at me and said he saw a purple canopy over my head, an imperial aura, and that the only other time he'd seen one was over Emperor Gaozu of Tang, when the doomed man first reached Luoyang, faint and guttering, and that mine burned no less bright and seemed to come from the same source. My wine cup shattered in my hand. For one clean second, I genuinely considered killing him, because that sentence is a beheading for my whole family, and then I decided a man that dangerous is far too useful to waste. "You can eat anything you like," I told him quietly, "but you can't say anything you like." He caught on fast, laughed it off as drunk nonsense, and we both knew he'd confirmed it. Then he gave me the thing that reorganized my soul. This wasn't some roadside grifter. He named himself Fang Changming, a 7th-generation Shangqing Maoshan Taoist who'd met Emperor Shizong in his youth. 71 years old, who 3 years ago sensed the imperial mandate stirring in the world and had been wandering to find the man who carried it. And he thought he'd just found him. His reading of the age? Great Liang has 3 to 5 years left, which I happen to know is exactly right, because the Prince of Jin declares himself emperor and restores the Tang in 923. The Tang, he said, could rise again the way the Han once did under Guangwu, but only through a man with a very specific destiny, one connected to the imperial line, yet standing outside its failure. And then he handed me the key to my own crown. The Tang fell, he said, on a broken legitimacy. Emperor Taizong named Prince Kui Wang Wei his rightful heir, but the throne went to Emperor Yizong instead, an illegitimate succession, and a mandate seized wrong can't hold. Yizong's line withered, Gaozu and his son were both murdered, the dynasty rotted from that original sin outward. Prince Kui, my father, the heir the Tang skipped, which means the mandate that line never legitimately spent might still be sitting, unclaimed, in his son. Du put it plainly. I carry a royal aura, but no imperial mandate yet. No reigning claimant holds it, which makes my chance enormous. A state with no true mandate dies young. That's why these 5 dynasties last barely 50 years each. The throne is vacant of heaven's blessing, and I might be the man it's waiting for. I sat there with my heart on fire, a 51-year-old peasant who now knew 3 things stacked on top of each other. My father was the skipped rightful heir. The usurper's dynasty is dying on schedule, and a genuine diviner just told me the empty mandate has my name on it. So I did what I do. I hired him. 50 taels and orders to go to Wang Family Hollow and commission 100 quality wood-chopping machetes for my recruits, my own weapons for my own growing force, armor to follow. "Aren't you afraid I'll take the silver and run?" he asked, stunned that a stranger would hand him a fortune on sight. "Trust the men you employ," I told him, "and don't employ the men you don't." Money, intelligence, weapons, students, clansmen, a hidden iron mountain, a diviner selling me a legend of destiny. Every piece I'd need was quietly walking into my hands, and I was still just a deputy Yajeng eating dry rice. Du watched me go and wondered aloud which branch of the fallen dynasty he'd just knelt to. So did I. But I was starting to think the answer didn't matter as much as what I was going to build out of it. Meanwhile, my life had turned into a slapstick I did not sign up for. Everyone wanted to sleep next to me. Not romantically, tactically. The squad leaders had done the math. The strongest man is the safest bunkmate when the enemy's 2 miles off. So Chen Lei and Wu Yang started openly lobbying for floor space beside the tank, and my nephews counter-lobbied on the grounds that protecting uncle while he sleeps is a sacred family duty, and I ended up wedged between 2 enormous snoring farm boys who by dawn had a leg and an arm flung across me like I was a body pillow with a rank. I kicked them both off and got up myself. Grandpa is a hot commodity in the tent assignment market, and Grandpa hates it. Hu Wenbo, at least, was earning his keep. 10 days of drilling had burned the softness off the scholar. Darker, leaner, actually keeping pace, no longer folding under his own armor. Turns out you can forge a man. You just have to refuse to carry his bag. Then the rotation. 2 months up at the bottling camp, patrolling a great wall that isn't the tidy Ming postcard yet. This version is raw. Whole stretches between peaks that are just piles of stacked stone, gaps a determined enemy can climb. Our job on the beacon towers was to be the early scream, spot the Khitan, light the fire, buy the main camp time. And the day before we marched up, the army did the one thing that tells a veteran everything. It paid us on time. Pay is always late. Early pay means someone upstairs knows blood is coming. I collected mine from the quartermaster Zhao Kun, a preening little tyrant who turned out to be the governor's adopted son, because since the An Lushan days, these warlords collect godsons like coins, and some of them inherit thrones, which means the man who controls every copper of the army's money answers to nobody but daddy, and once withheld a commander's pay for half a year over a slight. Note taken, be very nice to the man with the silver. My cut was fat, at least. 50 taels for the merit, 39 more in head money for my 78, plus salary. And I thanked Qin Feng with the kind of syrup that made him ask if I'd been a scholar. My father was, I said, and left it there, because my father is now the most dangerous sentence I own. Qin Feng sent us up the wall with a warning. Khitan scouts were killing our patrols. A big move was coming. He wasn't wrong. Night watch on my beacon tower, everyone frozen and exhausted in the black hours before handover, and I couldn't sleep, that fire under my skin again. So I was staring into nothing when I caught a glint in the grass 20 zhang out. Silver. My treasure sense doesn't care how dark it is, and armor shines to me like a lantern. "Enemy attack!" And I torched the dry grass into the dung fire and lit my beacon first, before the Khitan even reached us, before a single blade rang, throwing warning light from miles down the whole line. 100 of them swarmed the tower, with the same hooks and ladders we'd used on them, except this time we had the high ground. 60 men on terrain that costs an attacker 3 to 1, and we cut ropes and rolled the pre-stacked logs and stones down onto them until they gave it up and melted back into the dark, our reinforcements already climbing. 2 towers, 2 lifetimes of instinct, and the man who spotted the ambush before it landed was, once again, the grandpa. Qin Feng got the report that Zhou Hongyu's tower lit first and lit up himself. Early warning is the whole game, and I'd handed him the enemy before they arrived. Which is exactly what kicked off the next mess. The Khitan forward camp, 3,000 men, sat only 10 miles below Badaling, with their main camp, 30,000, just 30 miles behind that. And the governor, wanting to show the distant court he uses his army instead of just hoarding it, ordered Han Qiang to smash that vanguard. Win and get promoted. Fail and go back to babysitting recruits. But Han Qiang, who, remember, I now know is the court's real hidden knife, the man who opened Badaling to begin with, played it exactly as dirty as you'd expect. He had no intention of spending his elites on a fight he couldn't actually win against a camp that close to 30,000 cavalry, so he handed the job to Chen Hao and the green recruits, with orders to draw blood, keep his own losses low, and not get anyone important killed. Us, in other words. The barely blooded new army pointed at a Khitan camp 10 miles from a horde that could swallow us whole, so a traitor could look busy for a governor who wanted to look loyal for a court he'd already betrayed. Everyone in that briefing tent went stiff, because Badaling had fallen once already. And I did the only calculation that's ever kept me alive on this frontier. Get in fast, hurt them, and be gone before 30,000 horsemen decide to introduce themselves. The catch was the gate. Qin Feng gathered every officer and asked for volunteers to pull on captured Khitan clothes, walk up to a camp of 3,000, kill the guards, and open the door from the inside. A job so suicidal, the whole tent went silent. Reward? 100 taels for the lead, 10 each, a rank for everyone. I raised my hand and immediately haggled for double, because if I'm dying at a gate, I'm dying at a premium, and Chimail promised it out of his own purse if he had to. I picked my Wang and Li boys. 40 volunteered the second I said promotion, eyes shining. We only had 20 disguises. And then Ho Wenbo, my soft scholar, raised his hand. No, I said. And he said the 4 words that got him in. I speak Khitan. Learned it doing business with Khitan traders. Suddenly, the bookseller was essential. So we walked up to the gate of a 3,000-man camp openly, extra sabers hidden, throwing knives ready. They cracked the door, and 3 men came out to check us. Whose scouts are you? Gu answered smooth. The ones who went out today? Then the guard asked the code question. What's roasting today? And Gu had no idea. No idea what the passphrase was. So the man who talked his way this far did the only thing left. He snapped, "Roast your mother," and the gate opened. Because, as it turns out, that was near enough to the code. Or the guard just decided the man that rude had to be one of theirs. Gu's back was soaked through. Best improvised password in military history. Inside, we moved. I took the gate closers' heads before they finished shutting the door. My boys cut down the rest. And when the watchtower chiton grabbed for the alarm gong, I put a flying knife through him mid-reach. Then 2 more men off the high ground before a single note rang out. Torches up, gate wide, and the main army poured into a camp, still half asleep. Qin Feng came through the breach and tossed me my own Mo Dao. Stunned, I owned one, since the forging's been lost for years, and I aimed my 70 boys straight at the command tent, because common soldiers are worth 500 coins a head, and a commander is worth 1,000 taels, and I did not crawl through that gate for pocket change. Then the ground shook. A dozen heavy cavalry, armored horse and rider both, broke loose and came at us, and a dozen heavy cavalry can scatter hundreds of infantry like dropped rice. Everyone's heart went cold. I told my boys to get clear and met the lead horse alone, its riders saber up and gleaming, 10 feet, 5, and I brought the Mo Dao. Straight down and split both of them, man and horse's head, in one stroke, the wreck collapsing at my feet. Then I stood up on the dead horse and roared it across the whole camp. Anyone who stands in the way of Zhou Hongyu, I will destroy. And the heavy cavalry behind the first one flinched, slowed, and once heavy cavalry slows, it's just expensive meat on legs. We took their horses' legs out from under them, one by one. A 51-year-old peasant standing on a butchered warhorse screaming his own name, and hardened Khitan riders balking. Grandpa had arrived. I chased the fleeing front army general down by the gold glinting off him. Treasure sense never sleeps. And when he wheeled to fight me, I felt it instantly. Early skin refining, no contest. The Mo Dao took him and his raised saber both in half. His guards saw their general fold like wet paper and simply stopped existing as an organized thing. Half an hour, start to finish, and the vanguard was gone. And then the real prize, not the gold, the horses. 2,500 of us and over 5,000 war horses standing in the camp, because every Khitan rides 2. A war horse runs 30 to 100 plus taels, an armored one more than a suit of bright light. The other battalions didn't even bother looting corpses, everyone was grabbing reins. I walked out of that camp leading over 100 horses, 1 in each hand and more roped behind, enough for 2 whole cavalry troops of my own, because Yojo's entire 100,000-man army fields barely 3,000 cavalry. Horses are that ruinously expensive, mostly smuggled. Then the drums. Withdraw, burn what won't ride, get behind the wall before 30,000 come looking. We made the pass by dawn. The Khitan Supreme Commander reached his vanguard camp to find it on fire, littered with his dead, and every horse gone, his face going gray. The politics wrote themselves. Chen Hao rode back a conqueror, 3,000 enemy dead, 5,000 horses taken, a victory so far past his orders that Han Chang, who'd wanted a tidy little harassing win, nearly fell off the wall. Then realized his Xiang Lord's seat was now bolted down. Word reached the governor, and Zhao Jixin slammed the table in joy. 5,000 horses builds a 10,000 cavalry, the kind of force that breaks countries. Credit went to Chen Hao, officially. Bai Long, no fool, quietly noted that neither Han Qiang nor Chen Hao was remotely good enough to have done this. Something else was driving these wins, and said nothing, smiling, banking it. And me? I came home with 200 horses of my own, and every one of my disguise raiders made squad leader. which put 100+ men, clansmen and students, under my direct influence, near 200 counting the rest, and a captain's rank coming for me. When Li Wei said Lord Xiao wanted me, I walked in and Qin Feng waved me into a chair at his own table to tally the whole army's merits with him, a deputy Ya Zheng seated as an equal by his commander. 2 months ago, I was a 51-year-old man being dumped at a conscription desk. Now, I had cavalry, a captaincy, a private army within the army, and a commander asking me to help him decide who else got rewarded. The ladder wasn't just something I was climbing anymore. It was starting to look like something I owned. And here's the quiet superpower nobody expects. I can write. Barely anyone in that camp is literate, so tallying merits and drafting the battle report is a nightmare Qin Feng usually can't solve, and I knocked out a clean one in 2 hours. Numbers and narrative braided together, every kill backed by data, in handwriting that made him blink. Because a merit is worth more when the report reads well, a good write-up adds 3 points to any deed, and mine turned a scramble in the dark into a thrilling, audited victory. Qin Feng, who normally gets grilled on where his numbers came from, looked at my template and basically fell in love a second time. You should be a captain, maybe a Duto. He started banking my surplus merit for the reorganization he knew was coming, because 5,000 horses means new cavalry armies, and new armies means somebody gets promoted. My literacy is a weapon the Khitan can't parry. The rewards landed, 200 taels plus a 10-tael Tong gold ingot off the dead general, and my net worth kept climbing right alongside my rank, which is exactly the pair of things I need. Money and power. Then a cavalry battalion rode in to train us, under a commander Zheng Song, who'd heard about the raid general who halved a heavy cavalryman and wanted to poach me on the spot. Chen Hao blocked it with one sentence. We're grooming him for commander, maybe deputy military commander, because under Yang, the ceiling is deputy commander, and under Wang, it's the sky. And just like that, 2 powerful men were fighting over who gets to own the peasant. Nice problem to have. We became cavalry. My 200 horses, my boys' pay jumping from 500 coins to a full tael. And then, a month of getting whipped off horses learning to ride. 1 veteran drilling 10 of us, my village kids grimacing under the lash and climbing back up. I pushed mine hardest, because I made one rule the other troops didn't. My cavalry has to fight as infantry too, since a man who can't get up after falling off a horse is just a corpse with good posture. Meanwhile, Zhang Yufei laid the real stakes out flat. Nearly 10,000 cavalry now, more than the imperial court can field, which means the governor could crown himself king tomorrow and march south for the throne. And Yo-Jo is now a blade at the throat of the court and the Khitan both, which is also why she's trapped. She can't defect back. The lone survivor of 5 infiltrators reads as a traitor, and going home means dying. She needs her own power first. I'll be your support, I told her. You're too small to be anyone's support yet, she said, touched and not wrong. Fine. Goal set, captain by year's end. Then the spectacle, a grand review back at Yo-Jo, 6,000 horse thundering around the walls while the whole city watched and the nobles lined the ramparts. Up top, Zhao Juxin hit the peak of his life, telling anyone who'd listen that if the court so much as looked at him wrong, he'd ride south and take the dragon throne himself. Bai Long, demoted, sidelined, and still the only honest man on the wall, poured cold water in the politest possible voice. Your new cavalry's no match for the Khitan yet. The south is full of walled cities you can't charge, and the only thing that forges real cavalry is war on the grassland. True, radical, and exactly the advice that keeps the frontier bleeding. I watched the governor ride out, surrounded by guards like stars around the moon, and thought, half in awe and half in appraisal, so that's what the top of the ladder looks like. Then I cashed the leave Qin Feng owed my raiders, and he not only granted it, he lent me army horses for the road, a favor soldiers almost never get, and asked me to stand him drinks when my child's born around New Year. So I rode home a conqueror, 20 fresh squad leaders on borrowed war horses, because nothing says triumphant return like the boys who left starving coming back mounted. I wanted to see my household, and I wanted to check on Wang family Hollow's forge. The raid had proven those machetes, and now, flush with silver, I meant to order 1,000 real weapons for a force that was quietly becoming mine. We reached Pinggan County by afternoon, the gate guards too stunned by Yuzhou cavalry to do anything but open up, and the county magistrate himself, a big man to peasants, invisible in wartime, and very aware that Pinggan's soldiers had covered themselves in glory, came out to welcome us like returning heroes. Lord Li, the magistrate invites you all to rest. At the county office. The magistrate, a sweaty, overweight man who greeted me at the gate, which, for a peasant with no formal rank, is absurd, had a banquet laid and a reason for the syrup. My roar had traveled. Those who stand in my way, Zhou Hengyu, will be shattered. Man and horse had spread across Yo-Jo and maybe to the capital itself. And a village that had just minted a dozen low officers was a village worth being early nice to, since one of us reaching real rank makes a fat magistrate very grateful he'd bought lunch. He knew my father was in the county annals as the scholar Zhou Qing. He cut Li family village's taxes 10% on the spot. And after I left, he and his registrar sat there baffled by the same riddle everyone trips on. A 51-year-old widower with no children, legally exempt from service, somehow the strongest man on the frontier. The registrar, a man named Bai Chung, dropped the strangest detail of all. He'd been my student 20 years back, for all of 10 days before the world fell apart. My own past keeps walking up wearing new hats. None of them could square the math, and none of them ever will, because the answer is a soul from another world and a system that turns family into strength. And that's not a line that fits in a county ledger. Home was the good part. The village mobbed the horses. I'm high enough up the generations that there are great-grandchildren running around, and old Wang Guang Zong came out bent double from 3 months of doing everyone's field work. Inside my own gate, the household lit up. Cavalry now, full squad leader, aiming for vice captain next trip, and captain by New Year, 3+ months in the army and climbing like a rumor. And that morning, after my 9th set of forms, the ledger ticked over again. Combat strength, 8. 8 grown men in one dying peasant's body, lifespan still stubbornly stuck at 61, the family engine humming louder every month. The grim fine print hadn't moved. The number climbs when the family grows, and mine was about to. Because the sharpest mind in my house isn't mine, it's Jiang Shu Ying's. Over breakfast, she walked me through the farm strategy like a chancellor working a war map. 30 mu already bought, and if we want wheat, higher yield, better eating than millet, we need water, which means digging irrigation canals off the Wenyu River, which means buying the land between the Wenyu and Chaobai rivers, where the water's easy. I sat there realizing my wife had handed me a regional agricultural base plan between bites of egg. Speaking of which, I did the thing I always do, dropping a peeled egg into the maid Qin Ming's bowl and refusing, again, to let my house run a 2-tier table where servants eat worse, until the whole room went misty over it. And that same morning, the household got bigger. Jiang Shouying took Qin Ming's pulse and announced another child on the way, which mattered on 2 levels. A growing family is literally what my system feeds on, my lifespan lever and my strength both, and because it let me do the one thing this rotten patriarchal world never does. I told her plainly she was family now, not staff, and that I'd hire help so she wouldn't have to carry the load. Dignity first, the ledger can catch up. Then, 8 days of leave burning fast, I rode for Wang Family Hollow to check my real investment, the forge. Left the horses at the tree line with Wang Chai and Cheng Hua, climbed the mountain path an hour, and found the village transformed. A sentry posted in a tree now, because a place that gets raided once learns to watch the road. My diviner Feng Changming was down at the cave forge. The clan chief was in the village, so I went to find the clan chief first, because before I saw how many blades they'd made, I wanted to see the man who ran the mountain that made them. Wang Chongyuan poured his best tea and nearly fell over when his village boys announced they were squad leaders now. The weak scholar he'd known 20 years ago had turned their sons into officers, and he stood and bowed deep. "I'm counting on you." Then business. The forge had finished its first 100 machetes, and the price they'd charged through Feng Changming was 500 coins each, which the villagers thought was too high, offering to drop it to 250 because we're all family. I bumped it back up to 300 because a supplier who undercharges is a supplier who quits, and I need this mountain forging for years. The blades themselves were beautiful brutes, 3 feet 3 inches, a 2-foot head, top-heavy, 5 pounds, twice a normal saber, thick enough to split infantry armor in one swing. Too heavy for a foot soldier's wrist, perfect for a cavalryman who lets the horse do the work. My homemade arsenal was real. And then Wang Chongyuan handed me the single most valuable thing on that mountain, and it wasn't iron, it was weather. Their old folk read the seasons, and the reading was grim. A warm spring, a mild summer, means a savage winter coming, heavy snow, the kind you don't survive without stockpiled charcoal. Which sounds like peasant superstition until you follow the thread I follow. A killing winter freezes the grassland's herds, and frozen herds means the Khitan have to come south to eat. That's not a weather forecast, that's a war forecast. I told him to burn all the charcoal he could, and I'd buy it, for my pregnant household and murdering for what was coming. Feng Changming, covered in ash of the charcoal pits, walked me through the Mo Dao history like the walking library he is. Li Siye and his 2,000 Mo Dao troops holding the line at Xiangji Temple during the Anlu Shan Rebellion, one man cutting down dozens to stop a rout. And we agreed on the truth of this frontier. Cavalry's nice, but with too few horses, the real answer to steppe riders is Mo Dao infantry, and that craft is nearly a lost art. So I laid the industry plan. Send Wang family hollow youths to apprentice under the old Mo Dao smith in Pinggan County before he dies and takes the technique with him. And start armor making too. A blade needs a smith. Armor needs a smith and a tailor. Iron Mountain, forge, apprentices, my own weapons and my own armor, hidden up a road nobody maps. I left another 100 taels for 400 more machetes. Wang Cheng Yuan, scenting long-term money, threw in the charcoal free. There was also Wang Xiao, and here the mountain's grief got personal. 18 years old, and the bandit raid that I'd broken up had landed on her wedding day. Parents, brother, husband's family, all dead in one morning, leaving a young widow alone in a closed village with no family on either side, unable to farm or burn charcoal, with no way to survive the winter that folklore promised. Wang Cheng Yuan, who'd watched her grow up, asked me to take her in and bowed on her dead parents' behalf when I said yes. So I brought her back to Li family village the same way I'd brought dignity to everyone else in my house. A place, paid work helping my pregnant household, 2 meals a day with meat or egg, treated as family, not a servant to be worked and discarded. Another person under my roof, under my protection. And the genealogy, which measures exactly that, how many souls I shelter and keep thriving, ticked up again. Combat strength, 9. Lifespan, 62. The number that had been stuck finally moved, 1 precious year. Because that's the whole cruel logic of my cheat. Protect more people, live longer, hit harder. Grandpa's power grows with his household, and his household grows every time he refuses to let someone fall through the cracks of a rotten age. We came down the mountain in a caravan, the 2 blacksmith apprentices, Wang Xiao, 20-odd machetes to rearm the Li family boys, and Wang Jianfeng, riding double, needled me by asking Wang Xiao if she was his great-grandmother, then bolted. His horse forward before my whip could land. Back home, the new thatched house was already rising under Wang Guangzong's eye. Jiang Yixuan folded Xiao A in with the easy grace of a woman who runs a household without cruelty in it, and I set the rest of the machine turning. 2 or 3 more village youths off to learn smithing, charcoal to lay in before the cold, armor craft to seed. A soldier on leave is supposed to rest. I'd spent 8 days building the skeleton of a private army. Weapons, forge, apprentices, intelligence, a growing house that literally makes me stronger. And I still had a war forecast in my pocket that nobody above me had figured out yet. The last piece was the smith. I rode my apprentices to Wang's blacksmith shop in Pinggan, the old man who'd sold me my Mo Dao, and over drinks, he turned out to be a gold mine. He'd been a weaponsmith of the imperial household in Chang'an, forging Mo Dao and armor for the Tang court itself, then Luoyang, and after the last emperors died, he'd washed up in a border town hammering farm tools. A living library of a nearly lost imperial craft, sitting in a county nobody cares about. He wouldn't even take tuition to teach my 4 youths the Mo Dao secret. 3 months for the basics. So I forced silver on him anyway, because a master you underpay is a master who stops answering the door. And just like that, my weapons base was complete. Iron Mountain, forge, machete line, and now the craft of Mo Dao and armor both. Enough in a collapsing world to arm a few hundred men, which is to say, enough to be a warlord in miniature. A man who could hold a town or walk into any lord's service as a camp commander with his own troops already made. Then land, the boring foundation of everything. Rotating winter wheat, winter millet, spring wheat, spring millet, so a single bad harvest can't starve us. 30 more mu bought riding in Yojo uniforms, so nobody dared gouge the price. The village pooling mere 100 contiguous acres for shared irrigation off the rivers. Grain base, weapons base, intelligence base, a house that grows my own strength. 8 days of rest. And then leave ended, and I rode back to Yojo, where Chen Cheng greeted me with, "You're not a squad leader anymore. Report to Lord Xiao." And my heart slammed, because the cavalry conversion had made me vice captain, faster than promised. 3.5 months in the army, climbing like a fire up dry grass. Qin Feng, who trusts me enough now to brief me on high plans, laid out the next war. The Khitan had gone active in the northeast, taken Yingzhou beyond the Yanshan Mountains, trying to sever Yojo from Bohai State, the prosperous Kingdom of the Eastern Sea that's the one friendly power at our back. Cut that link, and Yojo is alone between a jealous court and a rising Khitan, which is a death sentence. So the governor means to retake Yingzhou, and cavalry, his shiny new cavalry, the reason he can even attempt this, will do it. Jiang Yufei, when I laid it out for her, confirmed the stakes cold. Without those 5,000 looted horses, Zhao Zhixin would have had to swallow the insult. Now he can reach 1,000 miles to punch the Khitan in the northeast. She also measured my kung fu again and went quiet. I'd hit late skin refining, right up against the iron bone wall that's trapped her for years, a 51-year-old peasant closing on the ceiling that stops veterans. Once my child's born, I suspect I go straight through it. The order came at the end of July. Tonight, 1 man, 2 horses, half a month of rations, raid Yingzhou. Only half the new cavalry, 2,500 riders, because a raid that far has to stay small enough to hide. Qin Feng's supply corps had the rations distributed before I'd finished blinking. Say what you want about a warlord's separatist rule, his orders move. And I packed for it. 2 horses, 1 to ride, 1 to carry both armors. Tie Futu for the close killing now that I'd be mounted, lighter bright light for the long haul, machete and saber, no Mo Dao. We slipped out that night, and the ride was brutal, past my own Li family village in the dark, unable to stop because the whole operation lived or died on secrecy. March by night and hide by day to dodge Khitan scouts. 3 days to the Yanshan Mountains, a day to cross them, then out onto the great northeastern plain. 10 days in the saddle left the cavalry wrecked. Nobody's built to ride 10 days straight. And near Yingzhou, we found some 2,000 Yuzhou infantry already waiting, the battered remnants of the army that Khitan had beaten here before. The reinforcements had arrived. Now, we just had to take a city 1,000 miles from home before the cold came down and the whole steppe noticed us. Yingzhou held 3,000 civilians and under 1,000 Khitan in the walls, but a 5,000-horse Khitan camp sat outside it, freshly reinforced, which smells like a trap but leaves no choice, because the longer we wait, the worse the math. Chen Hao called the attack for that night, and Chen Cheng put me at the front of our 100 riders as the striker, which by now everyone just accepts. At the deadest hour, 1 to 3 in the morning, 2,500 Yuzhou cavalry poured down the hillside onto a camp of exhausted men. Arrows killed the drummers before the alarm could sound, and since nomads don't fence their camps, we rode straight in. I went through them with a machete in one hand and a saber in the other. 20 dead in a dozen breaths, because 9 men's strength facing enemies 1 and 2 at a time is just arithmetic that always comes out my way. The camp of 5,000 dissolved into chaos, horses separated from riders, cavalry reduced to stumbling infantry, slaughtered where they stood. I punched all the way to the Khitan main tent for the big prize, and found it empty. The general was sleeping in the city. Missed him. So we did the hard job instead, rode for the west gate to cork the city before its garrison could sally into our flank, which is where it got ugly. 60-odd of us against 500 Khitan boiling out the west gate, arrows raking us from the wall, our own cavalry still tangled in the camp, and the infantry a mile off. I pulled back 100 paces out of arrow range, then spread thin to widen the net instead of holding a wall they'd overrun. And here's the trick of it. Pressed right up against their own men, the wall archers didn't dare loose because they'd hit 5 chitin for every one of us. Chen Cheng charged in to firm the line, and I worked the gap with both blades, cavalry quick, weaving along the wall, stacking bodies. And then their general came out to kill me personally. Yilu Hong. And when I heard that surname, my ears pricked, because Yilu is the Khitan royal clan, the blood of Ambagai, their new emperor. A late skin-refining martial artist, a man Qin Feng himself couldn't have beaten alone, riding out with a dozen guards to take the head of the enemy officer mad enough to fight up front. We closed, 5 zhang, 4, 3, 2, 1, and traded a pass that grazed my shoulder plate and numbed his whole right arm on the flat of my machete. He switched hands and came again. And here's the thing about the old me versus the now me. A month ago, I couldn't have stood in front of this man, and now I wasn't afraid at all. When he committed, I dismounted mid-charge, swept my saber low, and took his horse's leg clean off, then remounted and turned, because a cavalryman on the ground is a cavalryman whose nerve breaks, royal blood or not. Every hoofbeat toward him hammered his composure. He ducked to gut my horse, and I forced him back off his footing, closed with the machete, and put it through the gap in his neck armor. His head came off, and I caught it out of the air. "Yilu Hong is dead! Surrender!" Ho Wenbo screamed it in Khitan across the field, and the enemy's morale went out like a snuffed lamp. The infantry finally arrived to a battle already decided. By daybreak, Yingzhou was ours, the camp a field of corpses and loose horses. Then came the part that mattered more than the killing, the politics. Qin Feng called me in and asked me to give away the Yilu Hong kill, hand the credit to Chen Hao, who's 1 step from Deputy Shang Lord and needs a royal Khitan head to get there. And I didn't so much as blink. "I was a supporting player, sir. The credit belongs to you and General Wang. Without your combined command, how could I have reached him?" Because I understand exactly how this works. Fight the credit, and you get nothing and make enemies. Gift it, gracefully, and you become one of their own, the reliable man they owe. Qin Feng smiled and told me I'd lead my own team when we got back. And behind a screen the whole time stood Chen Hao, who stepped out after I left and said the quiet part. To stay that unbothered after handing away a kill like that, he's got something. We nurture him. 2 Khitan generals dead to a man, 3.5 months in the army, composure that unnerved a commander, and a captaincy waiting. I knelt, thanked them, and banked it. The merit doesn't vanish, it just becomes owed, and owed is the best thing to be. And then the two of them, talking after I'd gone, stumbled onto the thing I keep hidden even from myself sometimes. Qin Feng had dug up my father in the Pingan records, and it turns out that over nearly 70 years, my father and I between us taught half of Youzhou. His father's students became governors, agricultural commissioners, financial commissioners, war advisors, magistrates. My own students became men like the county registrar, a quiet web of officials across the whole region who all, somewhere back, called a Li their teacher, and none of them ever thought twice about the old man in Li family village. Chen Hao sighed at the waste of an age that turns a scholar who seeded the bureaucracy into a soldier. They also noticed the dangerous thing. Every junior officer in the battalion is now a Wang or a Li from my two villages, a faction forming in plain sight, and decided to spread a few out while still rewarding the merit. Because right now, surviving the Khitan and the court matters more than tidy politics. They have no idea the faction is the point. 5,000 more horses to fold into a new cavalry unit, a web of officials who owe my bloodline, 2 dead royals, a captaincy, and a private army quietly assembling inside theirs. Grandpa gave away a kill and walked out richer than if he'd kept it. The real prize of Yingzhou wasn't the city, it was the horse farm beside it. Youzhou's only grassland, the one place it can breed cavalry instead of smuggling it, which is the whole reason the governor reached 1,000 miles to take this dot on the map. Chen Hao had already sent word home. 7,000 or 8,000 infantry were marching in to garrison the city and guard the pasture. 2,000 more to be turned into cavalry on the spot. It's a 3-year investment. A foal needs 3 years to become a warhorse. But it meant Youzhou's cavalry would only grow from here. The city itself was a palimpsest of the frontier, having passed through Goguryeo, Tang, Bohai, Tang, Khitan, and now back to Han hands, a place where 6 peoples traded in the same market. Among the prisoners was a genuinely dangerous one, Yulu Jing, a Khitan royal of the ruling Yulu clan, half Han through a mother she'd loved, and, it turned out, the widow of the very Yulu Hong I'd just beheaded, married days before and arrived only yesterday. She spoke flawless Chinese and had the pride of a princess and the leverage of a hostage worth keeping. A royal captive is intelligence and a bargaining chip both. She was also lethal. When I let my guard down for a moment, she pulled a silver hairpin from her hair and drove it at my throat. And the only reason I'm alive is that silver shines to my treasure sense like a torch, so I caught her wrist before it landed. Then she turned the pin on her own neck, and I caught that too. There's a real steel of chastity and defiance in her, more than any pampered royal should have. Because her story is a tragedy stacked inside the Khitan court's cruelty. A half-Han daughter of a slave mother, tortured to death by her father's other wives, kept alive only by her father's blood, worth so little she was married off to a minor general. Royalty on the outside, garbage to her own clan on the inside. I disarmed her, kept her under guard, and later housed her safely in Youzhou through Ho Wenbo, rather than drag her home. A Khitan royal is not a thing you parade through a pregnant household. And the genealogy jumped hard off the new bonds in the battle both. Combat strength 12, treasure sense out to 30 feet, lifespan 65, 3 whole years added to my life in one leap. Because the system's cold law never changes. The more souls tied to me, the longer and stronger I live. It doesn't care how they came to me, it only counts. That leap put me at peak skin refining, a hair from the iron bone wall, a body turning to steel that most cultivators never reach in a lifetime. And I'd done it in half a year of punching air and a tree. My kung fu was screaming now, joints grinding like a machine warming up, waking men who slept in. And bunking that night, back by the steady, unmurderous Zhang Yufei, was frankly a relief after sharing a roof with a woman who tried to hairpin me. Say what you will, a comrade who won't stab you in your sleep is the finest luxury on the frontier. Then the ride home. 7 fast days, 3 horses each now, more than 10,000 cavalry in the Youzhou army, a historic first that bolted the governor's power to the floor. And back at Youzhou, the promotions reigned. Chen Cheng to Deputy Dutou, Lin Dutou to Deputy Commander, me, Captain, with all of Chen Cheng's old troops now mine. Chen Hao even sent along 100 tales of his own, unprompted, which tells you he's a decent man under the politics. And the whole chain above me rose on the wave I'd made. Qin Feng to Deputy Commander of the Army, Chen Hao across the brutal threshold from Commander of 2,500 to the upper echelon, Deputy Xiang Lord over 10 armies. I read all their new titles off the bottom of my own transfer order. Everyone I'd handed credit to had climbed, and they'd pulled me up behind them, exactly as designed. Best of all was the part Qin Feng thought was managing me. My Wang and Li boys had made so many junior officers that he worried about a faction, so he ordered them scattered across other battalions to dilute it. Which is the single best gift he could have given me, because a dozen of my own students posted into a dozen different units isn't a faction broken, it's a network seeded. My people. loyal to me, quietly threaded through the entire army. I agreed so enthusiastically he mistook it for team spirit. Captain in half a year, 2 Royal Khitan dead behind me, a private forge and a private army, a web of officials who owe my bloodline, and now my own men spreading like roots through every battalion in Yozhou. The commanders thought they were grooming a useful blade. They were handing an heir of the Tang the keys to their army, one grateful promotion at a time. Selling the transfers to my boys was the hard part. I read out the promotions. Jiang Yufei to vice captain, my whole corps made officers, and then the transfer orders, scattering them across other battalions, and the room went dead silent. Because these kids had bled and slept and starved together for months and didn't want to split up. One shouted he'd rather refuse the promotion and stay, then another, then the whole room. So I kicked the ringleader flat, barked that military orders aren't a suggestion, and then gave them the real reason, the one that shut them up. Gathered, where one blazing fire, scattered, where 1,000 stars, the sparks that set the whole prairie alight. And they got it. They saluted and went, my people spreading like embers into every corner of the army. Chen Hao, passing the alley, heard it and marveled. A single spark can start a prairie fire, and told Qin Fang to promote me again come spring, once I'd learned enough officialdom to survive my own speed. There was also the grim bookkeeping of my Khitan captive, Yiler Zheng, settling into her Yozhou house in Han clothes, and over a meal, she handed me a piece of black comedy from the underworld. The vanguard general I'd beheaded outside Badaling months ago? Also her husband, her first one, because on the grassland, when a man dies, his brother inherits his widow, and I had, without knowing it, killed both brothers she'd been married to, one after the other. 2 husbands, 1 blade, the same grandpa. I'd personally ended that whole family line. She called me a jinx to her husbands. Fair. I called us even. Then winter dropped its hammer. October, days below freezing, and I fretted about whether my thatched roof and 5 dependents had charcoal enough, while being quietly grateful we'd converted to cavalry, because the alternative was standing watch in the killing wind up on Badaling. And then, Qin Fang, now with a stove in his quarters, a commander's privilege, laid out the coldest order yet. Heavy snow had buried central Khitan, froze their herds dead, and driven the herders south to save what stock survived, and feed the 30,000 Khitan troops camped at Badaling. So the order came down flat and merciless. Ride into the grassland, kill the herds, and thin the population. Preemptive slaughter to wreck the Khitan's plans before they could organize a winter attack. 1 battalion only, 500 men, 2 horses each, 10 days' rations, out through a remote pass, and a Duto's objection that Hua Qubing took 3,000 into the steppe got exactly 0 explanation, because I could already smell that Qin Fang had a second, secret reason for 500 quiet riders that had nothing to do with sheep. We went in living off the war itself, kill a tribe, slaughter its herd into jerky, ride on. The first was 50 herdsmen who were also soldiers and charged us fearless. 500 cut 50 down like grass, and Qin Fang showed the one mercy of the campaign, penning the women and children, feeding them, letting them go. The next tribe was 500 or 600, and we took it with a 4-pronged flanking envelopment, my squad running down the survivors so no word could escape. I put down their fleeing chief with 1 pass. 10 days of it, thousands dead, 100,000 head of cattle and sheep scattered, the whole grassland thrown into chaos. It's ugly work, and I know it. When the empire rises, the people suffer. When it falls, the people suffer, I said over the fires, because the herders hadn't done a thing wrong except to be born in the path of 2 dying dynasties, and Qin Fang, who'd heard I taught students once, agreed with the melancholy of a man who stopped pretending the game is fair. I knew the real disease was who controls the resources. The herders only knew someone from the south was eating their sheep. Then the snow started. Qin Fang scanned the horizon for someone who hadn't come yet, and the real mission finally showed its face. A scout galloped in, flushed. A caravan of 500, 30 miles out, not a grassland tribe. And I understood in a heartbeat that the sheep had always been cover. This was the target. Qin Fang brought 500 silent riders 100 miles to catch. We swept toward it like wolves, and inside that caravan, behind a curtain that breathed out warm, stove-heated air onto the snow, a general bowed and spoke a single word that changed the whole shape of the campaign. Princess. Princess Anla of Bohai State, riding to the grassland to marry the Khitan Crown Prince Yilu Da, a wedding that would seal a Bohai-Khitan alliance and turn both of them against Great Liang. That's what Qin Fang had really come 100 miles for. His crossbows dropped the disguised general mid-sentence, the caravan broke, and he sent me after the fleeing carriage. I ran it down, arrows and horses, boxed it in, and the woman inside surrendered with a composure that genuinely impressed me. She stepped out and ordered her own guards to stop dying for her, sent the survivors home to tell her father she was in Yozhou, kept only her deputy at her side. A princess who reads a lost position and folds it cleanly to save lives. Rare. The carriage, of course, blazed gold to my treasure sense, and I relieved it of 5 10-tael ingots on the way past. I was at 1,000 taels now, properly rich. The ride home was a frozen misery, the princess shivering on horseback where she'd had a stove, gritting through it without a whimper. And I'll admit the beat I'm proudest of is a small one. When she needed privacy for a woman's practical problem the whole camp treated as unclean bad luck, I just handed her a torn strip of my own cloth, stood guard behind the horses without flinching or leering, and treated it as the ordinary human thing it is, after asking, with the tact I am apparently famous for, whether the princess needed to poop, which made Qin Fang choke on his jerky. Decency the men found baffling. Her, I think, less so. On the road, Qin Fang laid out the real game, and I laid out the rest before he could. Bohai had been playing both sides, refused to help defend Yingzhou because they wanted Yozhou and the Khitan to bleed each other white, then reap the ruins. Bai Long's plan was to snatch the princess off the wedding road. And here's the part I read for him. Bohai won't fully break with us because they fear a Khitan swallowed Bohai more than they fear us, and better yet, holding this princess, the governor will likely send her toward the grassland so the Khitan themselves refuse her, since a captured princess is a soiled princess, whose purity they'll question, and the moment they turn her away, the fragile Bohai Khitan trust shatters on its own. Qin Fang gave me a long look, because that was exactly the plan. The peasant keeps guessing the classified strategy like he's reading the script. Yozhou was giddy when we rode in at October's end. The interception had defused a Bohai Khitan pincer without a war, and Princess Unla proved she was no ordinary hostage by calmly announcing she'd go visit the Central Plains court herself and head home in spring. Zhao Jixin, a mere second-rank warlord hosting a woman who outranks him, realized uneasily he might be entertaining the actual heir of Bohai's throne, a girl who'd sat in a den of wolves with her face like still water and only her white-knuckled grip on her own robe giving her away. They'd let her go south. With 100,000 men and 10,000 cavalry at his back, Zhao Jixin figured the court wouldn't dare complain. And me? 1,000 taels richer and doing the cold math of ambition. A 500-man armored force costs 10,000 taels, 5,000 in armor alone, before food or pay, because even plain iron armor runs 10 taels a set, and bright light nearly 80. So I banked the loot, checked on my settled captives, kept my head down, and waited for the one leave that actually mattered. My children were due around New Year, 3 lives about to enter the ledger that keeps me strong, and I meant to be home when they did. But first, Qin Fang dropped the mission that changes everything. Come spring, I escort the Bohai princess south, to Kaifeng, then Luoyang, to stand before the emperor himself. Dangerous as a bag of vipers, since the governor's already murdered courtmen, and marching a Bohai royal into the capital in Weizen. Ambush everyone can blame on someone else, but the price was the one I couldn't refuse. A real rank before I go. Not a captaincy that's technically nothing, an actual 9th grade office, deputy cavalry commander, the line that turns a commoner into a someone, with tax-exempt land under him and standing to play the game. So I said yes, and then negotiated like a bandit, armor, crossbows, lances for my guard. "Are you planning a rebellion, kid?" Qin Fang said, and granted every word of it. Because the escort had to awe the court, my 100 got outfitted into full heavy cavalry, iron plate front and back, a crossbow each, and a 10-foot lance apiece. Literally every lance in the entire Yozhou army, all 100 of them, concentrated on my men. Even the arrogant quartermaster Zhao Kun whistled. In the Tang, 3,000 riders like these took the western kingdoms. That was the point. 100 armored lancers walking into Luoyang is a letter to Emperor Liu Chan that reads, "Don't." And Qin Fang had no intention of ever giving the gear back. I drilled them heavy through December, and then I went home, keeping my hands to myself with the reliable Zhang Yufei on the cold logic that I needed her fighting fit and in command, while I was 1,000 miles south, not laid up. Some restraint is just strategy. Home for New Year, and the village that used to bury its sons was festive, prosperous, half of it off my back, and glad to see me. My whole pregnant household lit up when I came in early instead of after the births. I did the old scholar thing and brushed the door couplets myself, and the one I wrote wasn't about peach blossoms. Iron horses sweep the clouds to clear the road. Golden spears catch the sun to build a peaceful realm. My ambition hiding in plain sight on my own gate. And then the part that hollowed me out a little. Ancestor worship and my father's grave. A bare mound, no stone. For a man who was secretly Prince Kui, 4th son of an emperor, who should have been buried with a prince's rights, and instead lies under weeds with nothing but my memory to mark him. A tall, thin scholar in a starched gown, a dignified, quiet face, and a fallen dynasty's blood in an unmarked hill. I told Wang Guangzong we'd raise a stone come Qingming. I'd write the inscription. Though my father never seemed to want the title, and Yizong's whole usurping line got executed anyway, so maybe the empty grave is its own kind of mercy. Then the feast, 12 dishes for 6, abundance piled up on purpose, the pregnant women toasting me in tea instead of wine, blessing me with long life and high office, and me toasting back in the flowery scholar's voice that once earned rice from neighbors. This cup's for the past. Every one of us walked a rough road here, and this year, finally, it turned. Jiang Xiaoying, who'd once dreaded marrying an old farmer, looked at the scholar soldier across the table and admitted the husband she'd feared had simply vanished, replaced by this. Warmth, firelight, a stove that never went out. For one night, the war was 1,000 miles away, and I was just a man who'd brought his family through to the other side of a hard year. And then, New Year's morning, all 3 Lin sisters shuffled to the door, one after another. "Husband, my water broke. Me too, me too." My exact nightmare, 3 at once, not one at a time. I sent them to lie down, sent Shao for hot water and salted broth, and the midwives and the village's experienced women swept in. And I, a man who'd cut 2 royal generals in half, stood completely useless in my own yard, kicked out of one delivery room, then the next, pacing between the hall and the cold with my heart in my throat, cursing that of all the lives I'd lived, I'd never once been a midwife. Wang Guangzong sat me down. "Your wives are strong. Every woman in this village has done this. They'll be fine." I hoped so, with everything I had. 3 heirs coming into the world at once on the first morning of the new year. The whole point of the ledger, the whole point of the man, and the strongest soul on the frontier could do nothing but wait by the fire and pray. By afternoon they came, a son, then a daughter, 3 healthy cries one after another, and the man who couldn't be rattled by heavy cavalry nearly wept in a farmhouse yard. Wang Jinyu, Wang Tianyu, Wang Miaoyu. I named them out of a poem I brushed on the spot about 2 dragons and a phoenix descending in one dawn, which Wang Guangzong gently noted was awfully imperial language for a peasant to be writing on New Year's Day, and which I ignored because I was busy handing every woman who'd helped a full tale of lucky silver. And the genealogy detonated. Combat strength 12 to 21, 9 grown men added in a single morning, treasure sense out to 60 feet, and lifespan from 65 to 74, 9 more years bought by 3 new lives. Because that's the engine's biggest secret. Nothing feeds it like children. My bones cracked and popped with power I couldn't sleep off. A 51-year-old body suddenly carrying the strength of 21 men because it finally had heirs to protect. The whole arc, the wives, the ledger, the grim arithmetic of a lifespan stuck at 61, paid off in one cry-filled afternoon. I spent the next days useless in the best way, hauling charcoal and salted broth to the recovering mothers, checking cribs at 3 in the morning, planning a whole village feast for the baby's first month. Then, because a war doesn't pause for diapers, I rode to Wang Family Hollow to arm up before the south trip and found my forge had arrived. The Mo Dao apprentices had cracked the lost craft and made 2 blades, near perfect, which felt like feathers in my new grip. I ordered 100 machetes and 10 sets of iron armor, and Wang Chongyuan took the order, knowing full well that a mountain village forging armor is a treason that ends in mass execution, and doing it anyway because Fang Chongming had convinced the whole clan I'm the chosen one who could carve out a kingdom, and a few hundred taels can buy 600 desperate people into a capital crime, which tells you everything about how hard ordinary life is. People don't gamble their necks until starving is the only other option. That night, Fang Chongming came to my room with the real briefing, the destiny one. He'd read the purple canopy over my head growing bright with the baby's luck, but shot through now with a black thread from the south, a coming crisis on my escort road. His counsel was blunt. Don't go, and you're safe, but you rot in place with no promotion. Go, survive, and every road after opens. And whatever I do down there, do it like a king, no cowering, no flinching, because timidity is what these vipers feed on. Then the part that made the hair stand up. At Luoyang, the Tang's old eastern capital, the dragon palace of my ancestors, where the last 2 Tang emperors designed, I must get inside the palace, audience or no audience, and absorb the true dragon chi still soaked into those stones, which might change me in ways he couldn't name aloud. The catch? The Great Liang Court keeps a bureau of astronomy, and its director is a Taoist master of 60 years cultivation who reads fate, a man who could feel a hidden Tang air walk into his capital like a bonfire in the dark. So Du hung a 1-inch Bagua tablet on a cord around my neck. Wear this, and the Skywatcher stays blind. The uneasy little knot in my chest loosened. I looked at the armor in my hands and thought about walking 100 lancers and a Tang prince's blood into the heart of the dynasty that murdered my line, with an amulet to hide my soul and a diviner telling me to act like the emperor I might secretly be. I seeded the Li family village forge, too, a worn bellows bought off Master Wang, half the output machetes and half Mo Dao, 200 tails to burn through, building weapons across both villages now. And then I went back inside to hold my 3-day-old children by the fire, a warlord's arsenal rising in the mountains, and 3 tiny heirs sleeping in a thatched hut, and for a few more days, let myself just be a father before the South came for me. The baby's 1-month feast turned into a status event. The county magistrate himself rolled up, uninvited, in a sedan chair with the registrar Bai Cheng, bearing 100 tails, medicine, and silver locks. And Bai Cheng, it came out, had been my student too, a dirt-poor kid who'd studied under me 1 famine year before his family could no longer afford to feed a teacher in rice. Another thread in the web. Half the officials in this county learned their letters at Ali's knee. The village watched a magistrate toast a peasant and quietly rewrote its opinion of sending sons to the army. Then I told my wives the hard thing. I was going to Luoyang. And the 3 Lin sisters went pale for a reason I hadn't fully weighed. Their father is a prisoner there, the censor who once remonstrated with the throne and got jailed for it while his household was enslaved. Jiang Xiuying, clear-eyed as ever, warned me, do not go to him directly. A captain with a secret Tang prince past making contact with a disgraced censor is a noose for everyone. So I promised the safe version. Inquire quietly, send food if he still rots in a cell, nothing more. A father-in-law in a capital dungeon, now a thread I'd carry 1,000 miles south. Back in Yozhou, I squared it with Qin Feng and shook loose horse armor, light barding against ambush, because a mission that provokes the Yiwu warlord will get hit on the road. Then Zhang Yufei measured me one more time and actually froze because I'd broken through to Iron Bone Realm, a body of living steel that's rare even inside the Imperial Guard, with only the far-off blood-refining realm above it. A 52-year-old farmer, half a year of practice, standing where veterans never reach. I preened. She scoffed at the guards full of such freaks, but the shock set in her eyes a long while. Not that any of it makes you a god. Even a blood-refining master dies under a massed charge or a wall of arrows. Steel bones don't stop an army. And Zhang Yufei's real value surfaced too. She's kin to the commander of the Imperial Guards, 5th rank, low on paper and enormous in power. The connection that might keep me breathing in a hostile capital, which is exactly why I keep her close. The escort banquet at Dongsheng drew Chen Hao himself, the deputy Xiang Lord, who toasted my 3 newborns and told my whole exhausted team to eat him broke on my tab. Soldiers who live on gruel demolishing a feast, delighted. And then the party got strange. Princess Anli crashed it, uninvited, curious about the valiant Zhou Hongyu, and insisted on eating with us like we'd shared meat by a grassland fire, which we literally had. A foreign princess at a minor officer's baby feast is a diplomatic headache. So I did the obvious thing and sat her with my Yuzhou captive, Yilu Jing, and the 2 women recognized each other because in a past life, Yilu Jing had met her as a Khitan prince's envoy to Bohai. 2 royals who'd once negotiated as equals, now both prisoners of the same peasant, drinking together in a side room. Their talk cut deep. Anla is the one crucial Bohai princess, betrothed to seal an empire's alliance, valuable enough to survive captivity and go home informed, while Yilu Jing is one of 20-odd minor Khitan daughters of a slave mother who'd be killed as soiled goods if she ever returned. Same cage, opposite fates. And Anla, watching Yilu Jing state her own worthlessness without flinching, found herself respecting the woman, while I sat at the men's table catching the deputy Xiang Lord's cups and feeling the princess's curiosity about me sharpen into something I couldn't yet name. Then Chen Hao stood and read the governor's order, and the room went silent, because it made me deputy commander of the Vanguard Cavalry and deputy lieutenant general, 9th rank. Low as ranks go, but a rank. A court-recognized office, the line that turns a nameless commoner into an actual official the throne has to acknowledge, with tax-exempt land and a foot inside the door. I knelt in my armor and thanked them, and for once couldn't keep my face still. Half a year from a conscription desk to a court appointment, and the princess, over in her side room, watched the man she'd been calling just a captain become somebody, and quietly recalculated. She also engineered her own move. She asked to take Yilu Jing south as her companion, a maid in name only, really a friend and a safeguard, keeping the princess in feminine company and, she teased, keeping my eye from wandering on the road. Chen Hao approved, so my Khitan captive joined the southern train. We drew 3,000 taels of travel silver, most of which, spent carefully, I fully intended to keep, being always broke. 100 heavy cavalry, and 1 flat warning from Qin Fang. Watch the Yiwu warlord's territory, because everyone knew, without saying it, that Zhao Jixin had murdered the court's men on that road, and the bill might come due on ours. The governor, Bai Long, and Chen Hao saw us off at the gate, and 100 armored lancers rolled south with a Bohai princess, a hidden Khitan royal, an infiltrator kin to the imperial guard, and a Tang heir with an amulet around his neck. Quite a caravan. The road was a rolling history lesson and a chess game at once. I chatted the princess through the shrinking cities, Chang'an, once 1 million souls, down to tens of thousands, Kaifeng at 200,000 or 300,000, Luoyang near 500, the richest places left on earth, and got her real motive out of her. She'd never wanted the Khitan marriage, and used her own kidnapping as a door to the Central Plains she'd dreamed of since studying the Confucian classics, hoping to warm Bohai's frost with the court. So I worked her, gently, with the truth I carry from another life. Her Bohai state is doomed to be swallowed by Yalu Ambagai within a few years, its great capital erased, its people scattered from the histories, because her father and brothers are unambitious men trying to buy safety by selling a daughter. And you cannot hold a country that way. Ally with Yuzhou instead, I told her. 200,000 troops and a wall of cities between you and the steppe. And maybe you live. She went quiet, because she already suspected her own family was too weak to save. Planting a seed in a future ally, one cold, accurate prophecy at a time. And at Zhuozhou, history winked at me. The prefect who rode out to greet us was Wu Kai, the former Yingzhou prefect who'd built up the very city we'd just retaken. And, though he'd faint to hear it, the grandfather of Zhao Kuangyin, the man who founds the Song dynasty. His son, Wu Liang, barely 20, stood right there, the future emperor's father. I bowed to a 4th-rank official 5 grades above me and kept my mouth shut, because knowing a stranger's grandson will one day rule China is exactly the kind of secret that rewrites fates if you breathe it. Wu Kai, who'd lost sleep when his Yingzhou fell and slept easy when he heard it was retaken, feasted the man who'd retaken it, without ever guessing he was hosting a Tang heir and a Song ancestor at the same table. The frontier's whole future was passing the wine around, and only I could see it. I toasted young Wu Liang early, praised his officer's bearing, called his future high, because I knew exactly whose father I was flattering, and the 20-year-old was so charmed he begged to ride south with me. His father, Wu Kai, refused flat, because below Zhuozhou lay Yizhou and the Yiwu warlord, and everyone knew what Zhao Jixin had done on that road. So, Wu Liang, being 20, stowed off after me anyway. We reached Li Wei, the last town before Yiwu, and walked straight into the trap I'd been warned about, wearing a friendly face. At the border camp, a Yozhou camp commander named Gao Yun met us. Old, passed over for promotion, about to be forced into retirement with a son too young to inherit. A man with nothing to lose and one desperate play. Kill the Bohai princess, defect to the Yiwu warlord with her corpse, and buy himself a command. A freak mid-February downpour flooded the road, and he used it. Carriages can't pass, rest in my camp tonight, and pitched the princess's tent right in the middle of his 500 men. He even tried to recruit me over dinner, dangling a promotion. I toasted Qin Fang's kindness and declined. And then he made his one mistake. He fed everyone dry rice. The pre-battle ration. The meal you give men before you spend them, when Qin Fang's own battalion barely rates porridge. I ate too much this afternoon, is how I put it to him later. Nobody serves 100 guests a fighting day meal out of generosity. So I quietly armored my 100 and waited. At 3 in the morning, his 500 crept up on the middle tents, unarmored, and my 100 met them ready. A volley of arrows into the dark, then a wall of iron-plated men boiling out of the tents with machetes, and the beautiful, ugly math of it is that armor versus no armor turns a 5-to-1 disadvantage into a slaughter the other way. Gao Yun, stunned his ambush was expected, offered a duel to spare his men, and I gave it to him, because I'd rather not lose a single boy to a lucky arrow. He came in his fish-scale armor full of gaps, raised his blade, and we crossed once. My machete came away clean. His head hit the mud a heartbeat later, too fast in the dark for anyone to see how, iron-bone speed making a man's neck a formality. His army broke on the spot, 200 dead, a dozen prisoners. The rest fled into the night, and I sent Wang Jinbao galloping to Li Wei to report. The princess stepped out shaken but whole, stunned Gao Yun had dared, and on his body I found the prize, the Yiwu warlord's sealed order, which the fool hadn't burned. Jiang Yufei said keep it, burn it, and Yiwu denies everything, but a stamped seal is leverage, because in the 5 dynasties, trust is the cheapest thing on earth, and proof is the dearest. Then the loot, 5,000 taels from Gao Yun's border trade coffers. I paid it out on the spot, 10 taels a soldier, up to 100 a captain, some 2,000 gone, which left me around 6,000 taels, counting Qin Fang's travel silver, enough to fund a whole infantry battalion, and bought 100 men's permanent silence, because nothing seals a mouth like more money than it's ever seen. I even handed the princess 500 taels for her expenses, right after she pointed out I'd looted 1,000 from her own carriage, and when she called me on it, I looked her dead in the eye and said I didn't recall any such thing. She just stared, having finally diagnosed me correctly. The man is a scoundrel. Accurate. And in one tent we found Wu Liang, the stowaway, the future later Tang guard commander, the Song founder's own father, bound and gagged, Gao Yun's insurance. I cut him loose, and he bolted for the exit, shouting betrayal, "Run!" Promptly tripped on his numb legs and planted his face directly in a mud puddle. He came up filthy, spat out a mouthful of the future, stared at 100 men standing over 500 corpses, and stammered the only question that fit. "You, 100 of you, routed 500? Welcome to the road south, kid. Grandpa's just getting warmed up." He demanded to enlist on the spot, mud and all, wailing that his old bastard father had ruined him by keeping him too safe. And when Wu Kai arrived with the governor's orders and found his stowaway son alive, only because I'd cut him free, he relented and let the boy come, on the theory that you can't see a rainbow without weathering the storm. I handed Wu Liang to Hu Wenbo, two comfortable-born men who'd both walked away from soft lives into the army and who'd get along, while Gu muttered, "Is this kid insane?" And I asked if he was sure he wasn't describing himself. Best of all, Wu Kai gave me a court connection for Luo Yang, his townsman Wu Hui, Assistant Minister of Rights. My web was growing a branch inside the capital. And the governor's answer to the whole ambush was the coldest, smartest move of all. Nothing. Bailong counseled Zhao Zhuxin not to impeach the Yiwu warlord because the court keeps Yiwu around specifically to check Youzhou, and if the two warlords openly feud, the throne relaxes. But if Youzhou quietly swallows an assassination attempt without complaint, the court starts to wonder if the two are secretly allied, and a nervous emperor is a distracted emperor. Hold the sealed evidence, say nothing, let suspicion do the work. The man's a chess master in a scholar's robe. Yizhou itself was a nest of vipers wearing court titles. The warlord was Zhao Jian, Prince of Beiping, 60 years old, and his real secret, running under everything, was that he'd allied not with Youzhou, but with Wang Yong, the Prince of Jin, the Tang loyalist in the north, his true son having married Wang Yong's daughter 20 years back and been publicly disowned to hide it, with the adopted son Zhao Bo pushed out front as the face. What Zhao Jian didn't know, that same adopted son would imprison him within the year. The frontier eats its fathers. Zhao Bo rode out to meet us, took one look at my 100 armored lancers, like Tang cavalry risen from the grave, and instantly understood how Gao Yun had died. Then he tried to make my men wait outside the city and remove our armor, and I refused flat. Military orders keep me within 10 zhang of the princess, and I don't break them for a prince's son. When he pulled rank, "You dare? A 9th grade nobody?" I told him plainly. I answer to Zhao Zhuxin alone, and the princess herself backed me by threatening to simply leave and take her complaint to the emperor. So the adopted son of a prince had to swallow it and bow to a 9th rank officer, which humiliated him thoroughly and told me exactly how little his title was worth. We rode our lances into Yizhou with our armor on. At the yamen, old Zhao Jian received the princess like a long-lost friend, then probed, bringing up the border camp attack himself, fishing to hear it wouldn't be pursued, and blandly blaming the whole thing on the unruly Youzhou army, which left me biting my tongue at the sheer nerve of the man who'd ordered it. He laid a banquet of land and sea delicacies tailored to Bohai tastes, thoughtful for a would-be murderer, and announced he'd travel together with the princess to Ding province tomorrow. But I never let her out of my grip. No staying in his yamen where those two could quietly slaughter us, just a cleared-out inn, princess and Youzhou army only, free of charge, which delighted me, since paying for it would have eaten my precious travel silver. And back in his residence, the old wolf turned to his adopted son and asked the question that hung over the whole night. "What do you make of those 100 Youzhou soldiers?" Zhao Bo's read, "Soldiers that arrogant mean Zhao Jixin is planning to rebel, and his own ambition unspooled from there. That come spring when the Khitan hit Youzhou, he'd take Zhuozhou and crush Youzhou from two sides with Khitan and Bohai, seizing the whole north of the river." So the two allied armies traveled together the next days, trusting each other exactly zero. When the Yiwu elites started needling my men, a manufactured spat over fouled horse water, I let it run, because arrogance needs a lesson. Their captain challenged Zhao Hu, got his sword knocked away, and a machete at his throat, and a gob of spit for garnish. And when his men drew, my 50 mounted up with lances, and the whole thing balanced on a knife's edge. 100 armored riders against 2,500, with old Zhao Jian going gray watching me not intervene. And then I sprang the legal trap instead of the bloody one. Your men aren't the Emperor's Imperial Guard. They're a prince's private guard. So any clash between us is treason against imperial power. So who's the rumor monger who dragged us both into a capital crime? Punish him, or you're spitting on the throne. The Yiwu commander had to strip his own captain's post to make it go away. A 9th-rank officer bent a 7th-rank commander over a barrel with nothing but the word treason. Zhao Jian watched, fascinated. At Ding province, I agreed to lodge the princess in the Prince of Beiping's own palace, because the one place he can't murder her is inside his own walls, where the blame lands squarely on him. So it's paradoxically the safest bet on the road, while I kept my 100 at an inn. And Zhao Jian, to my surprise, invited me, a 9th-rank nobody, to his private table, which meant the old wolf wanted something. He tried recruitment. Commander of his personal guard, the exact post he dangled at Gao Yun, plus 500 taels of gold under a red cloth my treasure sense had already counted through the fabric. I refused. Gao Yun died for that same offer, I noted. And when he pushed, "Why aren't you tempted?" I asked if he wanted the truth or a lie, and told him to send his guards out of the room. Then I detonated everything I knew, half of it deduced, and half of it carried from a history that hasn't happened yet. That he's secretly allied with the Prince of Jin, Wang Yong, a thing barely a soul in his own army knows. That his real son, Zhao Kai, the disowned one, married Wang Yong's daughter and drove that alliance. And that Zhao Jian had lately warmed to naming Zhao Kai his heir. And that his beloved adopted son, Zhao Bo, who already controls 60–70% of the Yiwu army, is the one that reversal enrages, is in direct contact with the Prince of Jin himself, and is plotting to take the throne from him. His pupils shrank. Nobody knows these things. And then the knife. You didn't even know your two armies nearly went to war yesterday, did you? Because your guards don't answer to you anymore. They answer to Zhao Bo. And right on cue, his soldiers burst through the door uninvited, proof in the flesh, and it took a hurled teacup to drive them back out. I laid the trap he was standing in. My 100 Yojo riders leave tomorrow, so tonight is Zhao Bo's only window. Engineer a clash between our armies in the dark, and let you, Prince of Beiping, die under Yojo hooves. The blame on me, the throne on him. I hadn't planned to be the man who triggered it, but the histories are murky on exactly how Zhao Bo imprisoned his adoptive father, and the timing lines up to now, which means I'm very likely the catalyst that tips this whole event into motion. Every condition's met, the hour, the players, the powder keg, and a 60-year-old warlord who spent his life betraying his way to a princedom sat sweating in his own hall, realizing the cage had already closed, and that the only man who'd bothered to warn him was a 9th-rank peasant he'd tried to buy with gold. The proof arrived the way proof does, in an absence. Zhao Jian called for his beloved grandchildren, Zhao Wen and Zhao Yuner, to join dinner, and the butler said they were sleeping, but they always ran to greet him at the gate, every time, and tonight they hadn't, because Zhao Bo had already smuggled them out of the city. The princess put the last weight on the scale. If the coup goes tonight, she dies too. So the old wolf believed, and asked me to help him kill it. The move was elegant. Zhao Jian proposed a friendly martial contest between the two armies as a pretext to bring my 100 inside his palace, but I left the lances and horses at the gate so that to Zhao Bo's watchers, the fearsome Yuzhou heavy cavalry looked suddenly toothless, tempting them to spring the trap early and mass the Liang troops around the palace to strike. My men clanked into the arena in armor, and I gave the order I'd been holding all night. Kill everyone but the Prince of Beiping and our own. My boys, my own men who don't hesitate, cut down Zhao Bo's planted guard officers before they understood the game had flipped. The guard commander fled over the wall. I leapt after him and took his head a heartbeat before his own reinforcements reached him. When those reinforcements arrived and their officer ordered us seized, my crossbows dropped him, and Zhao Jian stepped out in the flesh to tell the coerced soldiers the truth, that they'd been lied to, told only that the Yuzhou army meant to hostage their prince, and they laid down their arms in relief. Then we rallied the real family. Zhao Jian's loyal blood, his sons, Zhao Jun and Zhao Yang, his nephew, Shu Yuan, commanded the 3 camps outside the city, 7,500 men, and I sent Wang Jinbao galloping out with the prince's own handwritten order. Zhao Jun, who'd loathed the adopted upstart for years, read his father's hand, roared, "I told you Zhao Bo was a wolf," and marched. 3 armies swung shut like a jaw around Zhao Bo's camp east of the city. 2,500 infantry and his 500 light cavalry, 3,000 against 10. And Zhao Bo, coup exposed and retreat meaning a slow death by suspicion, chose to charge, betting his 500 horse could shatter Zhao Jun's center before the wings closed. Which is exactly where I'd sold my services, 10,000 taels and all the spoils to break his cavalry, because problems money solves aren't problems, and Zhao Jun made the classic mistake of thinking my 100 could only delay. We didn't delay. 100 fully armored lancers on armored horses met 500 light cavalry head-on in the open, and off-road at a gallop. and it was a massacre with a direction. 10-foot lances went through chest after chest, the momentum spearing the riders behind the first ones, too. 3 and 4 men strung on a shaft like candied hawthorns on a stick. Where a lance stuck fast, we drew machetes and hacked through. Armor against no armor. Their blades slid off us, and our weight and steel dropped them off their horses one after another. A one-sided slaughter that put real fear into Zhao Bo for the first time. He came for me because he'd worked out I was the hinge, a late skin-refining martial artist, strong and emboldened by the thought that a man Zhao Jian's age couldn't be much. I planted my lance, met him with the machete, and the first clash nearly shattered his arm and knocked the Tang sword from his hand. Iron bone strength against skin refining is not a contest. My armored warhorse bowled his mount over and dumped him in the dirt. He yanked a rider down, remounted, screamed for his men to swarm me, and I scattered the dozen who tried, pulled back, snatched my lance off the ground, and on the next pass, threw it. It punched clean through his chest and out the other side. Zhao Bo stared down at the blade sprouting from his own ribs, disbelieving that the peasant had overwhelmed him with numbers against him. And then the dark took him, and he fell. "The king is dead! Surrender!" His cavalry didn't surrender. They scattered into the night, because a man with a horse and a sword lives free anywhere. Zhao Jun's infantry hurried up, expecting to rescue the outmatched Yuzhou boys, and stopped dead, because there was nothing left but corpses and loose horses. 300 of Zhao Bo's cavalry dead, 200 horses ours, a field harvested by 100 men. "You're late, General," I told him cheerfully. "The spoils are ours." He asked where Zhao Bo had run to, and I lifted my lance out of the ground, with the adopted son of a prince still skewered on it, pale and ruined, dangling like meat. A message, in case Zhao Jun got any ideas of his own. He understood it perfectly. The coup that would have imprisoned a warlord and handed a whole province to the Prince of Jin died on the end of a peasant's spear, and the history books that were murky on exactly how never noted that the catalyst was a 52-year-old man escorting a princess he'd kidnapped. I collected my fee at the city gate, the other 5,000 taels, Zhao Yang whining that I'd already looted 300 horses worth 15,000, Zhao Jian overruling him because a bill is cheaper than an enemy. Then the old wolf's son asked the obvious, why not just kill him and let no tiger back to the mountain? And Zhao Jian, wiser, said no, kill the man who knows about my Prince of Jin alliance, and Zhao Jixin gets his excuse to send 10,000 cavalry through Yiwu before the court can blink. My knowledge was the leash that kept me alive. So I rode out, with 5 horses per man, where I'd come with 2, 11,000 taels to my name, quietly recruiting starving refugees as grooms along the road, because a princess may bring only 100 armed men without it being treason, but nobody counts the grooms, and grooms can be armed later. Both my royal captives, meanwhile, had quietly decided they felt safest beside me and didn't want to leave, which is a strange thing to inspire in 2 women you took prisoner, and I filed it next to the sharpening look the princess kept giving me. Back in Yozhou, the governor read the report and laughed in disbelief. 51 when he enlisted, and he does this, half wishing he could adopt me as a godson if I weren't older than him, and deciding my 300 stolen horses were reason enough to build me my own new cavalry battalion. But Bai Long names the real worry. I'd shown too much, and the court might try to keep me in the capital. So Zhao Juxin sent silk and grain to my wife and children in Pingan, a kindness with a hook in it, because a man whose family sits in your hand comes home. Everyone in this story is holding someone hostage. I just happened to be the one turning it into an empire. The last stop before the capital's true heartland was Xingzhou, richer than Yozhou, watched over by a Zhu family prefect named Chu Xian, whose whole job is spying on the warlords I'd just been dismantling. Same gate dance. Leave the lances, keep the armor, the princess backing me until they folded. And in that prosperous city, at the end of the longest road I'd ever walked, I heard the thing that lit up the money-starved part of my brain like a lantern in the dark. Xiangtang Mountain. A performer named Han Lan, a Luoyang name, and secretly a martial artist herself, stood up in front of a room of rich merchants and refused their silver for something no gold could buy. A champion to destroy the bandits of Xiangtang Mountain, the fortress stronghold that had butchered her whole family in a night. Hundreds of brigands, dug into a mountain since the Huang Chao rebellion decades ago, so well fortified that the Tang and the Great Liang had each thrown tens of thousands of troops at it and each limped home beaten, a nest that had swallowed campaigns and kidnapped a prefect's own son and sat, all the while, on decades of accumulated plunder. Every merchant in the room shook his head. Impossible. A grave, not worth a beautiful woman or anything else. And one man in that room leaned forward. Because I am always broke, and a mountain that's eaten armies for 30 years is a mountain with a treasury, And I don't have tens of thousands of men. I have 100 armored lancers who just erased 500, a mind that's already lived through this century once, and a habit of doing the thing everyone swears can't be done. I have a way to take Xiangtang Mountain, I said, over the jeers, and Han Lan looked at the 52-year-old in battle-dented armor and asked how many men he commanded. 100? 100? She almost laughed. The court sent tens of thousands and failed. And there it is, the same sentence I've heard at every rung of this ladder. You're too old. You're just a peasant. 100 can't beat 500. A scholar can't lift a Mo Dao. 1 year ago, I was a dying 51-year-old scarecrow being dumped at a conscription desk with a body that couldn't outlive its own children. Now, I'm a ranked officer of the 9th grade with a private army, a hidden iron mountain, a forge, a web of officials who owe my bloodline, 2 dead Khitan royals and a murdered pretender behind me, a Tang prince's crown buried under a bed, a diviner's amulet at my throat, and the strength of 21 men in a body the system swears will seize 74. So when a beautiful stranger tells me 100 men can't take a mountain that beat an empire, I don't argue. I just smile, the way Grandpa always smiles right before the world finds out it was wrong about him. The escort to Luoyang isn't even finished, and I've already found my next mountain of gold. Ask me again after Xiangtang.